Hi, welcome back guys. This is your sensei, back with another fanfiction. This is the first part of What If Naruto Opened a Dust Shop. Now before starting, please give this video a like and subscribe to the channel if you want more videos like this. Now let's get into the fanfic. Life is an explosion. I once heard a madman say that. Oddly enough, those words stuck with me. Maybe he was onto something. He was blonde, too, just like me. Coincidence? I think not. Life really is a blast when you think about it. Just like people, our lives usually blooms bright and fierce, then burns out. Short, sharp, and poignant. That was my mindset. Live life, make your mark, enjoy it while you can. But what happens when a man lives longer than he should? What happens when that proverbial explosion keeps going, building, enveloping all before it? Suppose I'm still asking myself that question. Haven't quite found the answer. When I first found myself stranded in this world, I was lost for a while. I fought for a time, discovered a few new tricks, kept moving. I tried different careers, learned a lot of hobbies, but in the end one path really stuck with me. Dust. I suppose you could call it the lifeblood of this world, remnants of a different age. It's not chakra, that's for sure, but the sheer potential of it. Well, the results speak for themselves. That, and a mountain or two, but really it's not like anyone's going to miss those. Did I mention dust can be used in pranks? No, because it can. Once I discovered the sheer chaos, the choice was obvious. Didn't even have to think twice about it before I took out that first loan. To you, running a simple dust shop might seem like something of an odd choice, especially for an ex-shinobi. For me, it seemed a simple one. When you've saved the world half a dozen times over and stranded yourself in a foreign dimension, there really isn't anywhere else left to go. You've seen all there is to see, done all you can do, and at some point just don't feel like fighting anymore. It's not that you can't or won't, but that you simply choose not to. So you try to find a hobby, something that makes you happy, something that makes others happy too. Let somebody carry on the good fight. Let someone else be the hero. Let something happen. My home was at peace when I left it behind, probably still is. Even if it isn't, it's none of my concern. They probably don't even need me, and it's not like I can get back to them. I've had decades upon decades to reconcile myself to that fact. When I first landed here all those years ago, I had nothing. I didn't want to be a huntsman, wasn't interested in any world-ending crusades, but I helped out a few people anyway. For a time, gave a man a lifetime or two to set up his precious schools. Talked a man queen out of burning the world. It paid off. Some might argue that I still have nothing to show for it. I disagree. But where was? Oh yes, dust. Dust is fascinating. There's so many ways to prepare it, and really, you can do just about anything with the stuff. Try mixing it with chakra sometime. You'd be amazed by the results. The SDC certainly is. The SDRD have been trying to buy me out for ages. Not happening. Bloody schnees can PSS off. Even now, eons after the fact, I'm still learning new combinations of dust. Hell, I've spent most of my savings learning what it means to be a dust specialist. There were mistakes, to be sure. Loads of them. Took me ages to MSDR my craft. Burned down a building or two, or three, or four. Who's counting? But I learned, because I had the time. Uzumaki genes have their perks, I suppose. Or maybe it has something to do with Kurama and being a Jinchuriki. I don't look a day over 20. Eternal youth has its perks, I suppose. Never asked for it, but it lets me live life at my own pace. In any case, I'm happy here. A simple life, with simple pleasures. Wandered the world, sowed some wild oats, and settled down. Nothing to worry about here in Vale, no crazy conflicts, just peace. Well, that and the odd explosion or two. Keeps life interesting, you know. Roman was having a bad day. The absolute worst sort of day, really. It had begun as it often did, with Cinder riding his butt, demanding yet more dust. Nothing unusual on that front. Grand schemes, the fall of Vale and whatnot. For that they needed more dust. Not just for them, but for the White Fang filthy animals and that blasted train they were building down in Mountain Glen. Only problem was, he'd already hit just about every dust shop this side of Vale. You see, that was something of another problem, because Junior had lent him these men for the evening and he was expected to pay them. Which he couldn't very well do because apparently the rest of said shops hadn't had a chance to resupply after last week's raid. He'd spent the better part of the night. But then, miracle of miracles, he found one. It was a homely little place, all bright in orange and red. Bright colors everywhere, right on the corner. Festooned with large banners. Sparks and explosions. He read the plaque outside with a sigh. Celebrating 25 years tomorrow. His brow furrowed yet further. Somebody's having me on here. He pushed the door open with melodic cudgel and was rewarded with the faint chime of a bell above. The door itself swung open on well-oiled hinges, exposing a large space beyond. Well, at least someone appreciated the classics. For a moment there he'd thought it one of those fancy automatic doors or something. Larger on the inside, too. Funny how that worked. But you see that wasn't important. The dust was. And by the brothers did this place have dust. Jackpot. Rows and rows of it, as far as the eye could see. Welcome to Sparks and Explosions. A merry voice called from the counter. What'll it be? Junior's men filed in after Roman, grounding off the sales spiel before it could take off. Do you have any idea how strong it is to find a dust shop open this late? The teller looked up. Already, Roman imagined the terror writ all over their face. SH. He put in quickly before they could scream. Calm down. We're not here for your money. Hand over the dust. The cashier looked up with an expression of utter boredom. Roman's calm evaporated. At a glance he wasn't much to look at. Blonde hair, bit of silver at the edges, blue eyes, whiskered cheeks. Handsome enough, but not enough to be noticed or remembered. He wore simple orange turtleneck against the cold with dark slacks and a strange necklace, coupled with an odd ... What was that? A headband or something? Had some kind of weird leaf insignia on it that Roman didn't recognize. Probably not important. Oddly enough, there was a critter on the counter. A fox, of all things. Small and orange with 9 flowing tails that looked harmless enough on the surface. Downright adorable, really. He found himself stricken by the strange urge to pet the diamond thing. Blast it. Don't focus on that, man. You have a job to do. I'm sorry, the cashier spoke slowly, drawing each word out with great care. Are you robbing me? No, one of the men drawled. We're here to sell you Girl Scout cookies. The clerk tilted his head. You are. I'll take 3 boxes, then. Roman flung up his arms. Quiet, you. What kind of lunatic was this? Did he not realize what was going on here? Honestly, he was beginning to suspect a lot of them were just ... off. None of them made any moves toward the teller, or was he the manager? Despite his lack of weaponry, no one moved. Not a single soul. You know, as Roman looked on, the young man stretched. You really don't have to do this. His back produced a harsh pop. You could just leave. Torchwick tugged his hat down. I really can't. If he failed here, Cinder would tear strips out of his hide. To say nothing of Neo. Blasted Fire Beach had them under her thumb right and proper. The only way out was through this one, if necessary. He didn't want to kill this mook, but he would if it came to it. At the end of the day, he valued his life more. You must be that Torchwick fellow. The teller leaned back, mildly bemused. Heard you've been raiding dust shops all over Vale. Was wondering when you'd come my way. Yeah, well, here I am. EFLC Ked gazed to his men. Grab the dust. His cane CLC Ked when they didn't move. Crystals. Firm. Uncut. Hop to it. The blonde planted a hand in his chin, but made no attempt to stop them. Do you have any idea who you're robbing? No. A tilt of the head. Does the name Naruto ring a bell? It did, but the memory was vague. So he lied. Nope. Not a one. Really? Wonderful. The man clapped his hands, startling him. I'm afraid it's been something of a slow night, you see. Had to send most of the staff home early. Give him the night off, you know. Melodic cudgel barked once, discharging around into the ceiling. Bits of plaster sprayed down. An alarm went off. It was worth it for the frown his actions drew. He looked up, regarding the hole in his ceiling as one might a particularly nasty stain on his shirt. Blue eyes narrowed, swept back to him. I'm afraid you'll have to pay for that. Pay. Roman choked down a snarl. Listen, you little sit, I'm not playing around here. Apparently neither were they, because that furry little critter on the counter hopped upright. Then spoke. They never learn, do they? Its voice was low and deep, the growl of a creature who shouldn't exist in this world. It's always so nice to be underestimated. What the hell is that thing? Never get tired of that. The blonde agreed as he climbed to his feet. Hey, Melodic cudgel jabbed his chin. Hands where I can see 'em, old man. Old. The blonde sniffed in contempt. Hey, I'll have you know I'm only 9,000. ... You must be joking. I'm really not. Still the whiskered fool persisted. Walk way, son. Something flashed through those blue orbs. Walk way right now and I'll pretend this never happened. Roman gave him a shove. I'm not your son. No. The whiskered warrior steadied himself on the counter. You're not. I'm grateful for that. If one of my kids ever grew up to be an arse like you, I'd hang myself. Maybe we've been alive a little too long, Kurama. He rolled his shoulders. Seems everyone's forgotten about us. Maybe it's time we reminded them. Roman's temper slipped its leash. Perhaps it was the stress that made him snap the way he did. Maybe it was the lack of coffee, or the fact that he hadn't had a smoke all night. Or maybe, just maybe, it was the infuriating bestiality before him. Really, who could say? Probably the latter though. It was too much. He'd had enough. No, more than enough. He had no more FCKs to give tonight. With a snarl he cracked the manager across the face with his cane and sent him sprawling. I don't think you understand what's going on here. His weapon cracked down again, striking the back of the blonde's skull when he tried to rise. You are being robbed. Each word brought with another blow, bending the BSTRD's body double against the floor. Do you understand? A hand snapped up, catching his cane. Metal buckled beneath clawed fingers with a shriek. Oh, blue eyes FLC curled into red. I understand perfectly. His free hand surged up, palm cradling a sudden surge of light within. Rasengan. It was a single word, but it became a hurricane. The snarling sphere smashed into Roman's exposed torso. Wall, glass, ground. In a heartbeat, these 3 words became the bane of Roman Torchwick's existence. His back struck the street and bounced once, twice, then thrice. On the third he managed to get a hand out from under him. He soon wished he hadn't. It only turned his tumble into even more of a mess and shredded his aura even more, grinding him into a crater that left him wasted and gasping for air. No sooner had he righted himself than a large shadow fell over him. Well, he thought distantly as clenched knuckles filled his vision. Errors have been made. Naruto's fist slammed into his startled visage a heartbeat later. Roman's world shattered as he crashed through another wall. Pain didn't even begin to describe what followed. He physically blacked out for a second before reality reasserted itself. Once it did, he sorely found himself wishing otherwise. Black boots crunched against broken glass on the asphalt, jarring him back to wakefulness. Well, Naruto's voice hummed over the ringing in his ears. I think we can all say it's been an eventful evening. And as much as I'd love for you to stick around, I'm afraid this is where we part ways. Roman struggled upright and crawled away. Roof. His heart hammered in his ears like the drums of a wild hunt out for BLD. His BLD. He just had to get to the roof. The lunatic was close now, close enough that he could see the BSDRD actually glowing, shimmering with golden light from head to toe. If he could just get to the roof. The man's hand clamped down on his shoulder. Going somewhere. Let me help you. A vicious crack of the wrist sent him flying off the air. Where the hell was his backup? Another window shattered as someone rode one of his men outside like a toboggan. Right, girl with a giant scythe. Nope, to hell with this. This wasn't his night. But at least the blonde was distracted. It was enough. Somehow, he made it to the ladder. A trembling hand tried to close around the lowest rung, pulling himself upright. He could hear the whine of a bullhead high above, promising him safety if he yet made it. Another hand closed around a second rung, hauling himself upright. Firm hands found him once again and dragged him down, denying him the safety he so sought. Run back to your MSTR and give them this message. Baleful blue eyes met his. Keep the hell out of my shop. Then he launched him into the air. Ruby whistled softly and touched a pale hand to her forehead. Oh, wow, that guy really flew. Is he gonna be all right? She looked on as the shopkeeper silently sauntered over to his ruined window. The very same window she'd shattered when she kicked that suit-wearing hooligan. Terror dawned as she collapsed crescent rows behind her back. Oh no, he wasn't going to bar her from his shop, was he? She whimpered a little as he glowered down at the glass. He totally was. No, blast it. She heard him sigh. I just paid this place off, too. I'm sorry. The words burst from her with such intensity that the owner jumped where he stood. I didn't mean to. He rounded on her with a sigh. You, forget it. You're not in trouble. Was that it? For a moment she'd been afraid he might call the cops. He didn't seem all that upset about it. Weird old man. Well, not really old. He just had a bit of silver in his eyes. Silver was cool. He'd handled that bad guy so easily. Was he a huntsman? He looked capable enough, but she didn't see a weapon anywhere on him. Ex-huntsman, then. He blinked down at her. You have silver eyes. Ruby returned the blink with one of her own. Yeah, it's nothing. He shook his head. You just remind me of someone. Forget I said anything. She really couldn't. The words wormed their way into Ruby's brain and took root. Her little knees twisted in thinly veiled anxiety as she remembered why she'd come here in the first place. I don't suppose you have any high-impact dust rounds for sale. For sale. A small smile bloomed across his whiskered face. Tito, you helped me throw those punks out of my shop. For that, you get a lifetime discount. She perked up like a puppy. Ooh, discounts were nice. How much we talking about here, Mr. Naruto? Not Mr. His smile became a grin. How does 50% sound? Ruby's eyes got really big. 50. Ruby squealed. Best shop ever. Her legs betrayed her. She didn't run. She vanished in a blur of crimson petals and struck Naruto's chest at speed. To his credit, the blonde reacted better than most, in that he braced his feet and only grunted a little. One hand came down on her head, stroking her dark hair. Without thinking, she leaned into his palm. The gesture felt oddly familiar, and then the faint CLCK of heels against broken glass cut between them. Naruto let go of her as if he'd been scalded. Just as well too, because when Ruby peeked around him she saw someone far more terrifying. Another blonde, but the difference between these two was like night and day. That black and white outfit, those piercing green eyes, the way she carried herself. Every part of her screamed danger. Huntress. Definitely a huntress. Maybe she could ask for her autograph. Hey, Glinda. Naruto dared a jaunty little wave. Long time no see. Look, if it's about the shop, I already handled. I'm not here for you. The woman CRPFLC cat out. I'm here for her. Ruby squeaked. Me. Naruto quirked a brow. Glinda did the same. She whimpered beneath their gaze. I'm sorry. Naruto's broom attacked the floor ruthlessly. There were no survivors. The whiskered warrior hummed softly while he worked, sweeping bits of broken glass and shattered dust out into the street. It was slow going. Tedious even. Roman's men had made quite a mess, to say nothing of the hole he'd blasted in the ceiling. Really, he could have used his shadow clones to expedite the process tenfold by now, but it was the little things in life, things like this, that kept him going. It also gave him time to think, to consider just how he was going to make Torquick pay for his transgressions. Or maybe you're just stalling. Kurama yawned from his customary perch on counter. We both know what comes next, don't we? Without missing a beat, the blonde swept up a bit of desiccated dust and winged it at the fox's head. If you can talk, you can help. He growled. I gave you that body for a reason. Fine, twist my tails, why don't you? Cold blue eyes met his. You let him go. His partner stretched once and uttered a jaw-popping yawn as he hopped down to the floor. He's probably delivered his message by now. With but a FLCK of his tails, he righted a fallen shelf and swept the ruined merchandise aside. Now it's time to hunt him down like the dog he is. Him, his associates, everyone who knows his name. No one will respect us if we let something like this slide. True enough, when you were immortal, you learned to appreciate the simple pleasures in life. When you ceased to age in the conventional sense of the word, you found meaning in the smaller things, the simple minutiae of living. When time could not slow you, when death was unable to hold you, you had to find things to live for, if only to stay sane. Surprises, for instance. No matter how long you lived, you could never know all there was to know, never see all there was to see, for each day there was always something new to find. It added that little bit of spice to life, just the sort that kept an ancient shinobi going. Even the odd spot of bad luck could prove a surprise, a shock to break one out of a tedious cycle. It could also serve as a warning. Not to him, of course, but others. There was always a bigger fish out there, always a monster hiding under the bed. Today, someone had poked that monster. Roman's actions had been ... well, less a surprise and more of a shock. A wake-up call, really. He'd been quiet too long, spent lifetimes getting this place up and running, not for the cash, not for the reputation, but the simple joy of having something to call his own. People might wither and die, but a business, a legacy, those were eternal. And one punk comes along, ruining it all. The handle of Naruto's broom cracked under his grip. Not just him, but Junior's boys. He recognized the Red Axe gang when he saw them. They destroyed no small amount of his dust. He'd be paying the club a visit, too. Kurama was right. Maybe it was time to clean house. Time to remind the world why you didn't mess with a man's life. A phone rang in the back, cutting the dark spiral of his thoughts short. Blue eyes shifted to regard it. Glass and masonry crunched underfoot as he stalked towards it. Still it rang. Once, twice, thrice. It was an old piece of work, not a scroll, but a landline, corded and all, with a dial to spin numbers. He wasn't sure why he'd kept the blasted thing around. Nostalgia. Memories of a simpler time. Who could say? Kurama hopped onto his shoulder. You gonna get that? Naruto didn't speak. He reached down, and after a moment's hesitation, picked it up. Hello, old friend. A familiar voice came through immediately. I heard about your shop. You have my condolences. You're in a great deal of trouble, Miss Rose. Ruby flailed her arms in a vain attempt to ward the words off, to no avail. They hit her like a physical blow, sending all her hopes and dreams crashing to the ground. Was this the end? Was she going to jail? No, she rallied her thoughts. This wasn't a police station. Miss Goodwitch had brought her here. Wherever here was, but it certainly wasn't downtown. But why? She whimpered a little. I was fighting bad guys. I did good. You did. The man before her tented his fingers with a sigh, but it does not excuse your crimes. You inflicted significant property damage on that shop. Right, calm down. Remember, this wasn't the police station. This was probably Headmaster Ospen's office, likely one of the many he kept around Vale. He couldn't arrest her, could he? Oh gods, what if he could? She didn't want to go to jail. She was too young, too pure. They'd eat her alive. Naruto said I wasn't in trouble. Her voice hitched a little. He did. Be that as it may, Ospen winced, almost as if he were afraid of something. We cannot simply let you off lightly on this. Am I? Her voice warbled and she swallowed once to recover. Am I going to jail? That depends. The ancient hunter blinked. Do you wish to? She made a keening noise through her teeth. No, that was a joke. Here at last his countenance softened. You'll simply be repaying your debt to Mr. Uzumaki. He laughed a little as she collapsed like a wet noodle in her chair. You will work in his establishment on the weekends, until such a time as your debt is repaid. Wait, why weekends? Because, he continued with a smile, I suspect you'll be quite busy with your new coursework in the meantime. New what, now? Ruby's heart skipped a beat. Then another still. Wait. Surely he wasn't suggesting ... was he? Diwa, she managed. Ospen leaned forward and offered her his hand. I do hope you'll be less rambunctious in Beacon, Miss Rose. Was he moving her ahead 2 years? A full 2 years. Ruby's heart howled back to life, turning her pale face a bright shade of red. Full steam ahead. All systems are a-go. Forward. She lunged across the desk and clasped his hand, pumping it up and down like a madwoman. Thank you. I'll be the best huntress ever. Do not thank me, dear girl. He withdrew, rubbing his arm with a wince. Thank Naruto. He called in a favor and a personal favor. That chagrined smile returned, more rueful than ever before. Now then, I believe your mother wishes to speak with you. All of Ruby's newfound joy turned to ashes in her mouth. Meep. Any chance you can, I dunno, pretend I'm not here. He sighed. I'm afraid that Fox is out of the bag. Wait, that's not how you say. The door slammed open behind her, cutting the girl short. Ruby rose. A familiar voice cried. You are in so much trouble, young lady. Roman was late. On a certain level, Cinder wasn't surprised. One could hardly trust a common criminal to keep their word in this day and age. No honor among thieves and all that. Roman had always been surly, and it wasn't as though he had chosen to cooperate with them. He and Neil had been forced into this arrangement, like so many others before him. Still, was it so wrong to expect a little professionalism in this day and age? Their place of meeting wasn't much better. Golden eyes fell seeked about, regarding her surroundings with nothing short of disdain. What had Roman called this place? The club. How droll. Even a private room such as this was too dingy for her tastes. Too much red by half, to say nothing of the wine. It would suit her needs. For now, honestly, it galled her. She couldn't wait to be rid of this filthy city. If it wasn't the bad wine, it was the people. At least Emerald and Mercury had the good grace to be silent. Perhaps they'd sensed her mood. Perhaps not. She didn't much care at the moment. When Roman finally stumbled in, she considered killing him out of principle if nothing less. The man looked awful. His white coat was tattered and stained, his hat horribly dented, and good gods ... he reeked. The smell alone was nearly enough to make her eyes water. Only her finer instincts prevented her from pinching her nose outright. Had he gone swimming in a dumpster? Where have you been? Such a nice boss I have. Torchwick collapsed on the couch opposite her, all but sprawling himself out without a care in the world. How are you, Roman? How was your day, Roman? Why do you look like shit, Roman? Cinder exhaled slowly. Must not kill this. This was why she loathed working with common criminals. Always so crass. Always thinking of themselves and nothing else. Always so small in their worldview. Never once thinking of the bigger picture nor the long term. For all his flair and panache, Roman was no different. But he was speaking to her, and she must attend. Her gaze flitted over him, noting the curious lack of the case she'd given him. Where's the dust? Don't have it. A slender brow rose. Excuse me. Some guy threw me out. He sat up with a growl and began massaging his dented hat. Beat my butt, then kicked me to the curb like I was nothing. You cannot be serious. Cinder's mouth twisted in a grimace fused with a snarl. Worthless fool. You lost to a common shopkeeper. Of course not. Roman's voice cracked like a WHPI, surprising her with its intensity. What do you take me for? Many things. A fool, a lech, hired help. But she'd assumed he was at least reasonably competent. Now it seemed that assumption was all for naught. Disgraceful. He'd gone with a score of junior's men, meaning he was hardly alone at the time. And yet here he was, broken and battered. She leaned forward in her chair. Was it a huntsman? He winced. Well, no, but... So he had lost to a civilian, then. Deplorable. A strange nagging sensation tugged at the back of her thoughts. Surely not. What were the chances? She folded one leg over the other as she poured herself another glass of wine. Her luck wasn't that bad. It couldn't be. Yet that thorn of doubt continued to tug at her nonetheless. It just wouldn't let her be. Curious. ... Do you recall the name of this shop? It was some dinky little place. Roman shrugged. Nothing special. Sparks and Explosions, I think. Weird name. No. Joke's on him, though. He chortled, unaware of her dread. Junior's boys really trashed the place. No. Way I see it, he'll be out of business for weeks. No. Cinder's BLD was no longer cold in her veins, it was ice, frozen completely. She could barely breathe. This was a bad dream. It had to be. She pinched her left arm, only to wince as pain flared through her limb. Not a dream, then. This was terribly, horribly real. Fury heated her heart, breaking her free from her frigid stupor. You must be tired, Roman. She whispered at last. Come here. Have a drink. He eyed her warily, but yielded beneath her state. Don't mind if I do. Like a good little worm, Roman did as he was bade. She poured, filling his cup to the brim. Roman accepted the glass that was offered and drank. His glass clinked against hers. Cinder waited, watched as he downed it in a single gulp, her body coiled like a viper. She counted to 3, 2, 1. Then she surged out of her chair and buried a fist in his gut. Torchwick doubled over with a rasping gasp and vomited what he'd just imbibed. Red liquid spattered the floor. Cinder callously flung a nearby cloth at him. Clean that up. You wasted good wine. Absolute and great. He did so, wasted and gasping for air. A minute passed. Then another still. Behind him, Emerald gulped. Cinder, should we leave? Stay, she hissed. What? Roman rasped as he looked up at her. What did I do? It's not what you did that angers me so, Roman. Cinder stood and poured herself another flute of wine. It's who you did it to. That FC King nobody. Roman retched where he lay on the floor. What about him? It was just a dust shop. What does it matter? Fool. Imbecile. Idiot. She wanted to shriek at him for what he'd done. That FC King nobody, as you so eloquently put it ... is Naruto Uzumaki. Instead, her golden eyes flashed over the rim of her glass as she drank. He once was in associative hours. Those eerie burning orbs closed for a moment, then opened again. Do you know what we called him? Roman gulped. I'm going to find out, aren't I? She muttered a phrase in a language he didn't understand. His visible eye squinted at her. What was that? Japanese. She took another drink. He taught me a bit. The closest translation would be ... the Boogaman. What? He climbed to his feet with a groan. You called him a demon. Well, Naruto wasn't exactly the Boogaman. She sat and crossed one leg over the other. He was the man you sent to kill the Boogaman. His face paled. Oh, Naruto is a man of focus. Thrice as quickly she stood again, unable to stand still. Commitment. Sheer will. Her forehead pressed against his. Something you know very little about. I once saw him kill 3 men in a bar with a pen. He looked away and she snarled at him. A bloody pen, Roman. Then suddenly one day he decided to leave. Her visible eye flashed with golden flames. He never said why. He wanted out. We made a deal. A truce. Her lips peeled back in a slur. And then, Roman, a few days before the anniversary of said truce, you raid his shop, destroy his stock, and smash his windows in. To be fair, he hedged. That last bit was the kid. I do not care. Cinder rounded on him with a hiss, temper still unspent. Her glass struck the wall and shattered, spraying bloody wine everywhere. Roman recoiled. I can fix this. Oh, she seeked a slender brow. How? Torchwick actually stood a little straighter, the fool. By finishing what I started. Didn't he hear a word I said? Cinder cast a despairing glance at Emerald, then whirled and drew him into an embrace. Naruto will come for you, and you will do nothing, because you can do nothing. But he let me go, only to send a message to me. She pulled away and touched his cheek. There is nothing he loves more than the thrill of the hunt. Her palm caressed his face. I should know. He taught me a great deal, after all. I suspect he'll be paying Junior and his men a visit as well. But you, without neither word or warning, her hand twisted, striking him. Roman's head snapped to the side. You have endangered years of planning. Flame leaped to her hand, promising pain if he raised so much as a finger against her. All my schemes will be naught because of you. She brandished the globe of fire at him with intent. Count yourself grateful I don't kill you here and now. Get out of my sight. Roman got. The door slammed behind him. Cinder whirled and began to pace immediately thereafter. She had to fix this. She must fix this. He could ruin everything. Would ruin everything. She couldn't hope to stop him. Few could. Osman himself turned a blind eye to his activities, catered to him, appeased him, for fear of provoking his wrath. Nor would Salem dare involve herself in this. Which meant, she reached for her coat and donned it quickly. I'm going out. Ma'am. Emerald flinched but a little. I don't understand. Do you want us to come with you? No. Cinder paused, realizing how shrill she'd just sounded. No, she repeated, forcing her voice to regain its calm tenor. That won't be necessary. She had to speak with him. Did she still have his old number? Of course she did. She'd committed it to memory. Something told her a phone call would be insensitive if she didn't visit afterwards. Fine. In person, then. It presented a great danger to her, of course, to say nothing of her pride. But there could be no risk without reward. Call first, then a visit. Right. ... So be it. Face to face it was, then. Nothing else would suffice. Diamond Roman to hell. In the shadow of Junior's club, a knife found a man's throat. The bouncer in question went still. No, it would be better to say that he froze. He ceased to move, blink, or even breathe. Every fiber of his being locked up as those words whispered in his ear. His mind became intimately aware of his surroundings, of the darkness, of the man standing within it, of that cold, cruel steel hooked against his jugular. His very soul gibbered for mercy, pleading that if he was just quiet enough, that if he just didn't move then maybe he'd be left well enough alone. Hello, Francis. You look good. No such luck. The guard dared a threat of breath and turned his head just so, hoping to hell he was wrong. He was not. Baleful blue eyes gazed back at him, set within a whiskered face framed by messy blonde hair. He discarded his shopkeeper's attire in favor of a crisp navy suit with a striking red tie, darker than BLD itself. On anyone else, it would have been gouch. On him, it was a reminder. This man didn't need a knife to kill him. That he had brought one at all said more than most. He was being kind. This was a man who had shown him mercy once in the past, a man who allowed him to reform and change his ways. He wondered if he would be shown such mercy a second time. Mr. Uzumaki. He swallowed once as his voice broke. Now, don't be formal. But look at you, you've moved up in the world. A smile touched the blonde's face. Lost a bit of weight, have we? Francis swallowed again, unable to mask his accent for fear of what might happen if he did. 50 PND. 50 men inside. He prayed his associate understood the warning. Naruto inclined his head just so. That's good. A hand patted his back, pulling the pistol from his belt. You won't mind if I take this, will you? He didn't have much of a choice, did he? You couldn't fight this man. You could try, but you would die. The gangs had tried once, never again, and he didn't want to die. He had a family, grandchildren in Atlas. He wanted to see them again. Oh, gods, he didn't want to die here. Are you ... here on business tonight? I'm afraid so, Francis. Blue eyes flashed in the dark, gleaming red in the gloom. Why don't you take the night off? The knife slowly fell away from his throat, jagged metal embraced skin, but not breaking it. Francis, report. Junior's voice hissed through his earpiece. Any sign of him? Francis tugged out the device earpiece with trembling fingers. Only then did he turn to face him. Thank you, sir. All he found was empty air. No one was there. Knock, 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 knock. It was the sound of doom, a steady thud, thud, thud that echoed against the door. 3 knocks, like drums out for BLD. Junior knew it in his soul. He'd known it the moment his men started screaming behind that door, known that there was nowhere to go, nowhere to run, nowhere he could possibly hope to hide where this creature couldn't find him. So he didn't try at all. Even as the door buckled and shook, even as the last of his gang died, Bloody stood at the bar, bottle in hand, and drank. Liquid courage fortified him, not enough to make him drunk, but it was all he had. All this, for a single mistake. It was just a dust shop. How was he to know that thing lived in Vale? He'd never been told. Or if he had, he'd forgotten. He wasn't sure which. He couldn't remember anymore. He wasn't sure he wanted to, not after the sounds he'd heard. The doors crashed open and his killer stalked over the threshold at a brisk pace, eyes narrow and intent. There wasn't so much as a drop of BLD on him. Not a one. A mountain of bodies behind him, and not a drop of bloody anywhere other than his weapons of choice. Blue eyes met his. You know, I never did like guns. His knife FLCK'd out once, carving a scarlet smile in the last man's throat. The fool went down with a bloody gurgle. So uncivilized. Wouldn't you agree? Melanie tried to bar his path, bless her simple soul. and was summarily swatted her through a wall like a straw doll. Nulsha made the same mistake and joined her sister not a moment later. Hai winced at the awful sound that followed. He wasn't even sure if they still lived. And oh wait, they were groaning. Thank the gods for small mercies, because he had the distinct feeling he wouldn't be receiving any. Where is he, Junior? I don't know. He dropped the bottle and raised both hands to show himself harmless. I swear. Honest to gods. He was here an hour ago, but he left. Do you really want to start a war with the underworld over this? You misunderstand. This isn't war. This, his hand rose. This is pest control. Junior raised his hands higher, shielding his face. I didn't know it was you. And now you do. The rejoinder was swift. Are you sorry? Yes, I swear. I didn't know. If he had, he never would have lent Roman those men. The knife came up under his chin. Tough. She, Junior warbled and broke. She won't let you get away with this. Yes, something flashed through those cold, dead eyes. She will. She won't. You truly believe that, don't you? His killer regarded him for a long moment. All right, I've got time. He kicked out a seat for him. Sit down. Junior did no such thing. To sit was to die. I don't think. No, Naruto snarled. You don't. Now sit down. Junior sat. You see, there once was a man. He found a full glass and knocked the drink back. He was a soldier of fortune, a mercenary who traveled the world. He wanted for nothing, needed nothing, and yet despite that, he decided to share his abundance with someone who was less fortunate. An orphan, 14 years old, an urchin with nothing to her name but a pair of swords and the clothes on her back. A kid who had, by all rights, been used and abused from an early age. Troubled, prone to violence. Stop me if you've heard this one before. Junior gulped. No. Go on. I will, thank you. Naruto hummed his thanks. So this good man opened his home to this girl, and when she stole from him, this good man loved her anyway. He took up a fork and began to carve away at his meal. When she failed in school, this good man showed understanding and patience. A piece of steak came and went, swallowed in a single bite. When the girl lied and cheated and clawed and fought, this good man showed compassion, until the girl who had never felt anything like being wanted or loved, finally did. It was a miracle, no two ways about it. He set his fork down, and the silence stretched between them. 1 week later, the girl killed the good man. Naruto slammed his glass down, etching a crack in the fine material. Junior's gaze followed it, mesmerized. You see, the girl was afraid. She was scared that one day, the good man would wake up and realize she wasn't worth it, like all the others in her life. That little fracture etched itself deeper now, becoming a deep fissure. She couldn't bear the thought that this good man, would throw her away like that. So, he took up the fork and made a slashing motion across his throat. She killed him. Only then did Junior glimpse the scar there. The glass split, sending both halves tumbling to the table. But then something incredible happened. Naruto took a hold of each and laid them atop one another. The good man didn't die. He got right back up, pulled the blade from his neck and smiled at the girl. A faint glow stemmed from his hands and Junior vaguely felt a flash of heat. The man did not chastise the girl for her crimes. He simply held her close, as a father would, as no one ever had before. He gave the glass back, now free of imperfection completely. Care to know what he said? You're going to tell me, aren't you? He made her a promise, more a vow, really. Naruto steeped his fingers and laid his chin atop them. He swore to her that he would never lose faith in her, never hurt her, never betray her trust. His head tilted just so, shadows falling over the right side of his face. He taught her a few tricks after that, small things that a child like her could use. Why did he have the worst feeling about this? What happened to this girl? When she was old enough, the good man let her go. Naruto's smile had too many teeth. He embraced her forehead and gave her his blessing, sent her out into the world to make her fortune. And she did. He leaned back at last, his tale complete. Would you like to know her name? Hi. Some small part of him already knew. No, it couldn't be. The chances of that ... it just wasn't possible. Naruto leaned in. Warm lips brushed his ear. Cinder. That name broke him. Cinderfall was a stone-cold beach. He'd never seen her express so much as an iota of emotion for her anyone. That was just it. She cared for no one. Nothing. The idea that someone had raised her, even if they weren't her BLD ... it threatened to unman him, because it meant she would never go against such a person. You didn't mess with family. She wants to destroy Vale. A brow quirked. Is that what you think? He did. She said as much ... hadn't she? Unless she was lying. So you see, Junior, a scarred forehead pressed against his. That's why she won't do anything. I raised that girl. A spark of gold burned through those cold blue eyes. Took her and when she was at her low point and made her what she is today. Told her she could be whatever she wanted to be, so long as it made her happy. He shrugged carelessly. Maybe I should have disciplined her better. Suppose I'll have to after this. Why? Hai whimpered. Why tell me all this? Because I wanted to make things perfectly clear between us. The rejoinder was swift. You see, I know you're wearing a wire, just as I. No Romans listening in on our little conversation. A hand came down on his right shoulder, all but fastening him in place. Don't worry, Hai. You're going to live. He's going to hear every bit of this. I am. You are. His head bobbed. You've done me a great kindness. You see, I'm a merciful man. A knife slammed into the table, burying itself to the hilt. So I'm going to make an example out of you. ... What? Your left eye or your right? Cold dread coiled in the pit of his stomach as those words meant him. I'll make it quick. Painless, even. A low smile creased those whiskered cheeks as his gaze swept down to the knife. I hear eye patches are all the rage these days. Really, I'm doing you a favor. You'll have ladies beating down your door. It was the best offer he'd get. This or death. Looking at it like that, the loss of an eye was a small price to pay. Left, sir. He swallowed once and closed his eyes. The knife blurred at his face. Clench your teeth. Power was complicated. There are many different kinds, of course. Physical, mental, emotional. Blunt, subtle. Power came in many forms, but at the end of the day, it all boiled down to respect. For it was respect that built the foundation of fear, and with it, wariness of said power. And like it or not, Naruto knew a thing or two about power. When you lived this long, it came to you naturally. Power was the reason she'd come to visit. The door squeaked open like a fearful field mouse, the bell above it chiming mournfully. Naruto looked up from his cleaning. Well, look who it is. Cinderfall slipped inside, puffing out her chest to make herself seem larger than she was. Adorable. He remembered a different time not so long ago when she'd hunched her shoulders inward, trying to be small, trying to hide, not just from him, but everyone, everything. When she'd been a tiny, gawky thing, gawping at everything in sight. To him, she was still very much that girl. You look well. She reached across her body and gripped her right wrist. How have you been? Well, he said with some heat. More than you clearly seem to be at the moment. What the hell were you thinking? She laughed and it sounded forced. I didn't intend to. Cut the CRP. Cinder chuckled again, then. This time her laugh was not that fake, cultured thing. It was soft and low, raw and dangerous, the sound one predator might make towards another. She knew better than to intimidate him, if only because she knew it wouldn't work. He'd hoped she wouldn't become something like this. I haven't forgotten your lessons, she said, smiling. Not a single thing. He checked a smile of his own. Then why are you here? Cinderfall was no fool. She knew she'd been caught. Naruto raised his arms. Well, he quirked a brow. Aren't you going to give your old man a hug? Her face flamed with color. Daddy, no. Daddy, yes. He wiggled his arms. I haven't seen you in years. You don't write. You never call. His brow darkened. You send your goons to wreck my shop. That wasn't me. Her eyes flashed with panic from her younger days. I only remember the name by chance because you mentioned it once. How was I to know you actually went through with that high-brain scheme of yours? A silence stretched between MSDR and apprentice. In the end, Naruto shrugged. He supposed that was fair. It wasn't as if he'd advertised his new business to old acquaintances. Only a handful knew what he was doing these days. Just the way he'd liked it. Unfortunately for her, it didn't absolve her of guilt. And how was I to know the girl I raised became a common criminal with plans to destroy an entire kingdom? I'm not. She looked aside. I don't wish for the destruction of Vale. It's complicated. Naruto didn't lower his arms. Wanna hug it out? Must we? Yes. He grinned. We must. Cinder rolled her eyes and walked into his waiting embrace with a huff. Her chin came down over his shoulder as his arms clasped her by the back. She fought for a moment, then succumbed with a put-upon sigh, the sort a surly teenager might make toward an overly affectionate parent. In many ways she was still a little girl to him. She always would be, even if he had to. DSBL in her every now and again. So, he grinned down at her. How have you been? Still going through that conquer-the-world phase? She growled and wriggled in his arms, to no avail. His grin was strong. This isn't a phase, Daddy. He pulled her a little closer to him. HMMHM. Sure it isn't ... So. Plans? Tell me. Now. His foster daughter sniffed once. And if I don't want to? He patted her back. Then you get a spanking. She went terribly still. You wouldn't dare. No. Care to test your old man. She told him everything. And he laughed. All right. You can do this. Summer Rose whispered the words to herself as she approached the dust shop. You'll be fine. She spurred herself forward in spite of her fear. It's only been 15 years. Sure, 15 years of total radio silence between the two of them. Summer's confidence, what little she had left, threatened to shrivel up at the reminder. 15 years since their last mission together, and she'd not spoke to him since. It wasn't fair. How was she to know he'd been so close and yet so far? She was all but mumbling by the time she grasped the handle. Her feet cemented themselves to the floor, refusing to budge another inch. It was all she could do so psych herself up. She could do this. She was a huntress, a silver-eyed warrior. She'd faced down grim time and time again, escaped certain death, and lived to tell the tale. She could do this. She would do this. Just be brave. She only had a few minutes to do this. Ruby would be reporting for her first day any minute now, and she had to get this out of the way before her darling daughter arrived. Trembling fingers twisted the latch, and she heard voices. Simply doesn't warrant the damages. Was someone there? Summer stilled, unwilling to interrupt. Gentlemen. She heard him then, the low timbre of his voice muffled through the wood. It seems I've been away too long. That I've been forgotten. Silver eyes peeked up through the door window and beheld a familiar face near the entrance. His face, just as she remembered him. Are you really trying to shortchange me here? He spoke unto two men, each wearing crisp white suits. Familiar suits. One of them muttered something less than flattering. Thought so. This reeks of Jack. He's meddling again, isn't he? All right, here's what we're gonna do. Naruto climbed to his feet and moved around the counter. If you schmucks don't pay me the insurance money that I am so rightfully owed for the damage my shop has suffered, He jabbed one finger into the left man's chest with intent. Your head. He whipped around and jabbed a digit at the other. Is going up his arse. There was a silence as one of them replied. He sighed. You sure you want to ride this train, little man? You can't touch us. This time, the response came through loud and clear. The SDC would have your hide if you harmed so much as a hi-here. His words peaked into a ghastly wail as the blonde grabbed him by the face and moved. An awful ripping sound filled the air, punctuated by a second scream that had no business coming from a grown man's throat. Cloth ripped. Something else ... tore. Rapid footsteps approached and the door swung open in her face. Summer dove out of the way. Two men soared out, conjoined in a way no one wanted to imagine, and crashed into a building. They were still screaming when someone stalked out the door past her. Excuse me. A young woman all but stumbled past her, pale face sick with nausea, bright eyes half-lidded in embarrassment as she covered her mouth with one hand. Summer had all of an instant to take her in. Clad in a deep red dress that clung to her curves like sin, she was a beauty like no other, golden eyes sharp and framed by long, ruse midnight black dark hair. Then she was gone, heels CLC king harshly against the sidewalk. Don't forget to visit tonight. A familiar voice called at her back. The young woman pivoted in place and flipped him the bird before she stalked off. Summer's heart sank and all her courage withered as a flower would in the dead of winter. Nope, couldn't do it. She whirled to flee. A thorn of concern pricked her heart and held her back. Naruto was in many ways the wind. He could be calm and gentle, a cool spring breeze to those he loved. But when his wrath was roused, when he was angry, when someone took something from him ... well, she had seen the results firsthand. Hurricane, tornado, cyclone, there weren't nearly enough words to describe the absolute avatar of annihilation he became. After all, one did not simply leave the life of a shinobi behind. A life like his followed you. It clung to you, infecting everything you were, everything you loved. If there was even the slightest chance that anger was directed at Ruby, unlikely as it may seem. No, she couldn't risk it, no matter how embarrassing it might be for her. She had a duty as a mother. Duty trumped fear any day. So she plucked up her courage and darted into the shop before that fear could get the better of her and send her scurrying. Keeping her body low to the ground, she skirted a broken shelf and poked her head around the corner. Quietly now. Quietly. Broken glass crunched underfoot and she was betrayed. Naruto looked up, caught in the process of toweling his bloodied hands with a damp cloth, and granted her a small smile. Hello, sweetie. Summer's heart skipped a single treacherous beat. Silver eyes were drawn inexorably to blue and without thinking, she yanked her hood up. Without the glass acting as a barrier between them, she could see him perfectly, just as he could see her. Really, it wasn't fair. He hadn't aged a day since she'd seen him last. Nope, not fair. Not fair at all. Belatedly, his words caught up with her. The smallest of pouts tugged at her lips. Thought I told you to stop calling me that. You did. He granted her a crooked grin as he leaned against the counter. I chose not to listen. There's a difference. So, his head CC'd to one side, rather reminding her of a certain fox. What brings you to my shop after all this time? What do you think? A familiar yawn arose somewhere behind her. She obviously wanted to check in on you. Her gaze found Kurama's false form easily enough. He'd all but curled himself up on a pillow near the counter, much like a cat. Anyone else would have thought him an adorable little fox, albeit one with 9 tails. She knew better. She'd seen things. As she looked on, the small fox raised one of his many tails in a lazy greeting. She found herself returning it before she caught her wrist. ... Aren't you angry? Both man and beast blinked. Why would we be angry? That was it. Seriously. Just like that. Oh gods, they weren't even mad. It would have been so much better if they were. Anger she could have dealt with. Sorrow, tears, anything but this. He was just happy to see her, and Kurama with him. She hadn't expected them to be so calm, happy to see her even. Had she really come all this way for nothing? Summer, I'm fine. She leaned on a shelf, only to wince when it crashed to the floor and fell apart at her feet. Oh, you know, I was just in the area. I don't blame Ruby for the damage. His words were a knife, cutting her fears to the quick. It wasn't her fault, you know. Her shoulders slumped. Oh, thank God. I mean, after all. Naruto favored her with a rueful smile. ... She's mine, isn't she? Double irk. How? Isn't it remarkable how 4 little words can make you come undone? Just like that, all of Summer's carefully wrought plans and schemes were falling apart. She'd come here intending to be an adult about all this, come under the pretense of checking in on him, making sure he was all right after all this time, not plotting Armageddon on his enemies. She hadn't intended to broach the subject of Ruby's parentage quite that bluntly. How? Tai's been dead for a while, Summer. Naruto picked up an upturned chair and plunked down in with a sigh. I may be a lot of things, but I'm not blind. Speaking of which, her brow furrowed. That woman I saw earlier, Cinder, the blonde blinked. What about her? Are the two of you? What? No. He recoiled and made a face. I adopted her a while back when she was just a runt. She was just paying her respects ... and promising her support. It was a good explanation. Too good. Paranoia reared its ugly head despite her best efforts. So you're not. I'd rather shag a cactus than shack up with a girl I all but raised, thank you very much. For all his fire and strength, Naruto had always been something of a bleeding heart where children were involved. It sounded so very like him to pick a girl off the street and take her under his wing. His words to her earlier made sense. He'd told her to come back tonight, and the way she'd roll her eyes at him even flipped him off. Those weren't the acts of a lover. Why did that make her feel better? Just to clarify, she swallowed once. I'm sorry about ... the way things ended. He scratched at a whiskered cheek. That makes two of us. Shit happens. People move on. ... Have you? Naruto's head snapped up. The rest of him went curiously still. Anyone else might have been concerned by the sudden intensity of his gaze. Not Summer. She kicked at the cracked flooring with one boot, unwilling to meet his eyes for fear of what she might find there. Blast it. She hadn't meant to say it like that. Treachery. Bad brain. This betrayal would be remembered. I really haven't. There was a curious note of longing in his voice, one she remembered all too well. I missed you. She peeked at him through her hair and watched his right hand curl into a fist. Me, too. Her heart twitched. She really had missed him. It really was a stupid fight, wasn't it? I'm sorry I snapped at you back then. He sighed. Do you even remember what we were fighting about? Her head bobbed in a tiny nod. She did. She'd tried to change him once. After Ty never came back from that god's awful mission. She'd been hurting at the time, lashing out in blind grief, trying to make him something he wasn't. It had been a futile attempt born from pride as much as selfishness. Some things just weren't meant to be changed. It wasn't possible. You couldn't alter the color of the sky any more than you could snuff out the sun. Years of self-reflection and being a single parent raising two girls helped her to realize that. And he was standing here before her, looking every bit as miserable as she felt. Well, that simplified things. Yes, that simplified things a great deal. Summer crossed the distance between them in a silver streak. Naruto caught her by the hips and reeled her in. Strong arms closed around her, pulling her into a warm embrace. She yielded to it with a soft sigh and buried her head in his chest, reveling in the faint scent of dust and fire he exuded. Blast it, he really did give the best hugs. And he was so damnably warm ... Or was that her face? Strong to tell. I'm sorry, she mumbled against his jacket. For all of it, silence was his sole response. Come back, please. The damn broken words spilled forth. Ruby needs a father. She looked up at him, silver eyes shining with unshed tears. She needs to know who you are. Her voice warbled a little as she thought of Yang, not hers by BLD, but her daughter all the same. I know Yang isn't yours, but she'd love to meet you. His arms trembled a little around her. I think I'd like that. When he tried to pull away, she held tight. Summer, nope, she muttered. You're mine now, never letting go. Reigniting their passion could come later. For now, she just wanted to savor this. It felt good to have him back, like she reclaimed a little piece of himself. Here in this moment she didn't care about the past, where he'd gone, who he might have been with, or any such hypothetical concerns. She was first. She would always be first. I'll talk to Osmond about the insurance. She babbled into his chest, mouth running away with her. I know he told you about Ruby working here, but you won't even have to pay her all that much. We'll get this sorted. He chortled a little against her. I take it you saw that last bit with the insurance agents. Saw it. She slapped his chest. Half of Vale probably heard those too. Did you really have to shove that guy's head up his? To be fair, I'm fairly certain they were working for Jack. Jack Schnee. Her smile froze. Oh, is that so? I just might have to pay him a visit. Personally, Naruto frowned. Summer, no. Summer, yes. And then Kurama opened his big mouth. If the two of you are quite done making eyes at one another, we have a store to run. Summer scowled at the little red terror. Oi, watch it, Fox. Oi, watch it, Huntress. He sang right back. If the two of you want a canoodle, get a room. Preferably one far away from me. You're entirely too noisy. I can wait. Naruto nudged her hip with an elbow. You can leave out the back when you're ready. ... Then can we stay like this? She leaned up and embraced his neck. Just for a little while. Naruto didn't use words. He simply held her. ... It's good to be back. Sometime later, Naruto sprawled in his chair with a rueful smile. Kurama hopped onto the counter to join him and curled up there with a scowl. Stop grinning like that. You're contagious. That cleanup took entirely too long. ... Did it? He sighed and crossed both hands behind his head, too content to take offense. Did it really? Yes. A tiny tail swatted his arm. Because you refused to use shadow clones. Really, if you just stopped holding back. Nah, he waved a hand. Where's the fun in that? Comfortable silence stretched between them as they lazed about. Neither spoke for what felt like an eternity. Someone might have sought to fill the void with aimless chatter or traded further barbs among themselves. But they didn't feel the need. Both man and beast knew one another well enough by now and didn't feel the slightest need to do so. There could be only one course of action from here. So, Kurama yawned at last. I know what you plan to do, but how do you intend to go about it? For now, we'll let the gears of Vale turn. Naruto considered the ceiling with a sigh. Roman will stick his head out sooner or later. He can't hide forever. And then we chop it off. He made a sharp cutting motion with his good hand. Once and for all, you do realize he may well send someone after us in the interim. A blonde brow arched. And, fair point. The bell above the door chimed once as someone opened it from without. Kurama perked up. Naruto's posture shifted just so, his upper torso leaning forward as a knife fell seek down his sleeve and into his hand. Summer had only just left, and Cinder wouldn't be returning until later this evening. Junior knew better than to send anyone after him. So then who? A familiar voice called out to him when a streak of red and black blurred inside. I've come to work. His fingers twitched and it vanished from whence it came. Oh, he leaned back, concealing it's just you, Ruby. Now that he knew what to look for, he really could see the resemblance as she scampered through the door. She was Summer's daughter all right, but beneath it he saw something else, those ever so faint dual whisker marks tripling her cheeks. Ruby was quick on her feet, almost unnaturally so. Something told him that if he turned his senses on her, he might find the faintest stirring of chakra coils there. He chose not to, if only because she wasn't alone ... and for fear of what he might find. No, she wasn't alone at all. That was most certainly a belladonna on her right and a schnee on her left. He'd known a few of both during his heyday ... and more recently. Mercifully, neither looked a thing like him. Or perhaps they simply took after their moths. In theory it shouldn't be too strong to conceal whiskered cheeks with a bit of makeup. Perhaps he was being too paranoid. Wow, a low whistle pierced the gloom. You really did a number on this place, huh, sis? He recognized Raven and Ty's brat last. 1, because she brought up the rear, and 2, it was absolutely impossible to miss the blonde bombshell. Arms crossed behind her head, she craned her neck to and fro, surveying the damage to his shop with keen lilac eyes. The last living piece of NeonZangetsu long in this world. It almost hurt to see her. Really, he'd have to pay Raven a visit one of these days and smack some sense into her. Ruby make a keening noise akin to steam escaping a tea kettle, snapping him back to reality. Young, I already told you. That wasn't me. Well, she paused and cast about, as though seeing the damage for the first time in broad daylight. Maybe the window was, and possibly a shelf or two, but still. Not my fault. You dolt. The schnee palmed her face. Do you not know the meaning of restraint? I do. The little reaper flailed her arms. But there were so many bad guys. Naruto took mercy on her at last. Why are you here, eh? She jolted a little, startled by his inquiry. Aspen said I have to work for you on the weekends, until I paid off the damages. He knew that of course, he'd just said it to make her squirm a little. Really, he couldn't help but tease her. Aspen really was a cheeky BSDRD, making her work for him like this. Was probably afraid of PSS him off. That, or this was his way of getting back at him for forcing Ruby into Beacon 2 years early. Really strong to tell with the old geezer. Plans within plans, that one, ever trying to gain an advantage while keeping him placated at the same time. At least Salem made some modicum of sense. Every now and again. Now that he was back, he might need to check on her, too. Wouldn't do for her to get too big for her britches. So many heads to crack, so little time. I appreciate it. Outwardly, he merely quirked a brow. But, well, there's not much to be done right now, still waiting on the insurance money. He looked past her. So, is this your team? Ruby made her introductions with all the energy a 15-year-old could muster. No faulting her that. Young he knew, and the dark-haired one was Blake, such a familiar name, but there at the end. His gaze fixated on Weiss in particular. And I see a schnee. Why am I not surprised? Everywhere I go, there's always a schnee. Weiss absolutely bridled. Excuse me. You're excused. EFLC had a hand at her. Now buy something or get. I know you're good for it. He half expected her to burst out in a sputter of denial. She did not. Points to her. What came next forfeited what little goodwill she'd earned. I've heard about this place. Her gaze flitted about, considering what little intact stock he had left. Your dust is supposedly second to none. He caught the gleam in her eyes at once and didn't like it one bit. How much would it take to buy you out? A muscle jumped in his jaw. No. A hand snapped up, vetoing her. Why do you silly schnees always think you can buy me out? Is there a price tag on my forehead? No talking. He jabbed her forehead when she tried to speak. Schnees never have anything good to say. Really, your mother was the only exception. On a whim, he decided to twist the knife. Be sure and tell her to visit sometime. He wriggled his fingers once and laughed as she recoiled. Real lightning between the sheets, that one. One last wistful sigh stole the fight right out of here. Those were the days. Young whistled. Ruby gagged. Blake ... Wait, why was she taking notes? He supposed it didn't matter. Weiss had already died inside. He saw it in her eyes. Excuse me. You're excused. Again. He smiled. A speechless schnee was a good schnee. Feel free to pick your jaw up off the floor at your leisure. Kurama chuckled. It would prove his undoing. Because the very moment he did. Why, Ruby noticed him. She cooed, eyes all but aglow with stats. Is that a fox? Kurama placed his chin atop one crimson paw. I am no mere fox, mortal. Holy CRP. It talks. She all but squealed with joy. Is it a toy? No, wait, toys don't talk like that. Blake pulled in from the side and actually had the gall picked him up. Looks rather lifelike to me. Kurama bared his fangs at her. I will bite you, belladonna. She remained unbowed. Very lifelike indeed. Joke's on you, Young elbowed her partner. You should see the stuff this one reads. She's probably into that sit. Blake dropped Kurama like a hot potato and slapped at her arm. Bah, kids these days. He'd seen stranger things eons ago. Really, biting was tame nowadays. You know, Naruto thumbed his chin. I think I might have written a book series once or twice. Still do, in my spare time. His fingers drummed against the counter as he grappled with the vague memory, faded though it was. Ninjas of something or other. Kurama huffed. Smutty trash, more like. Blake pivoted, regarding him with a narrow look. Do you mean, ninjas of love? He snapped his fingers. That's the one. You've heard of it. I'm thinking it's about due for a sequel. He wasn't sure he liked the gleam in her eyes. Was she drooling? She was. Can, the young fauna gulped once. Can I get your autograph? Kurama rolled his own. Look what you did. Ignore him, he's a big softy. Young scoffed. Yeah, I bet. It was the straw that broke the fox's back. Kurama buried his head in both paws and muttered something less than kind. Right, you've brought this upon yourself, Branwen Spawn. Know that I will show no mercy. What you gonna do? She booped him on the nose. Bite my ankles. The rest of his words hit her a moment later. Wait, Branwen, you know my mom. No, and hate. Came the snarl, rip and tear. Then he pounced on her. To be fair, he's nice to most people. Naruto shrugged as Young reeled back, clawing at the angry Biju now tearing at her hair. You should see what you really looks like. Young wailed. Get off, Udiamen Kitsune. Off, off, off. You cannot comprehend the amount of tales I do not give. And, Weiss quirked a pale brow. What does he really look like? Is this a joke? Weiss, no. Ruby cried. Kurama reacted before Naruto could even hope to warn her. In a single bound he leaped from Young's hair, planted himself on the desk and whirled to meet the sullen Schnee. His fur stood on end, all 9 of his tails rigid as red spikes. For an awful moment nothing happened, and Naruto wondered if his partner had lost his touch. And then, a towering golden maw filled the entirety of the Schnee's vision. Boo! Weiss toppled backwards with a startled shriek. Dick! Naruto shook his head with a rueful sigh. Well, this is my life now. He won't get me. Roman whimpered in the dark. I won't let him. Crazy BSTRD. I'll show him. Cinder returned that very evening. Much to his amusement, she was not alone. Welcome back. He looked up as the bell rang. Any news for me? Not quite. Her face was a curious study of contrast, equal parts concern and anticipation wrapped up in one package. She squirmed like a naughty little girl with her hand caught in the cookie jar. Fond memories. She'd been such a wild and coltish little thing back then. I thought it best to introduce my associates. Under his watchful eye, she nudged 2 teenagers forward into the light. To prevent any confusion in the future. This is Emerald. She gestured to the girl on her right, a dark-skinned youth with green hair and striking red eyes, and the boy is Mercury. Her left hand indicated the pale silver-haired boy at her side. Please be kind to them. Naruto looked down at them, up to Cinder again, down once more. Really, there was only one conclusion to make. You have kids. Cinder's eyes all but bulged. Daddy, no. Her hands clamped down to stifle the outburst, but it was too little, too late. Wide golden eyes narrowed as she realized she'd been had. Really, it was all too easy. Wait a hot minute. Mercury gave a startled blink. You're her old man, because I don't see the resemblance. There isn't one, you louse. Naruto feigned a jab at the younger man's head. I adopted her when she was about ... He held out a hand and levered it above the counter somewhat. I'd say about this tall. Cinder whimpered. Mercury sniggered softly. Really? Emerald all but twitched. You adopted Cinder. Kurama cackled. Blunt, this one. I think I like her. Mercury blinked. Is that a talking fox? Sure is. Naruto didn't bother to contradict him, eyes fixed on Emerald. What, did she adopt you, too? Yeah, sorta. The tan shrugged. I mean, she took me off the streets when I was younger and ... Wait. He saw the moment her thoughts CLCK'd into place. If you adopted her, and she adopted me, she held up her hands counted, doing the math before turning a hopeful expression on him. Does it make you my grandfather? Naruto's brain fizzled out. You've doomed us. Cinder all but sank into a chair. Here we go. Wait, Mercury frowned. What? I don't get it. Naruto did a double take. Blinked. Once, twice, thrice, now. Then he inhaled deeply. Kurama absolutely hissed. Don't you dare. Too little, too late. I have a granddaughter too. Cinder groaned into her palms and doubled over. Daddy, no. Daddy, yes. Naruto slammed to his feet. This is wonderful. I must tell everyone. Emerald had a grandfather. She must tell everyone. No, resist. She slammed the brakes on that train and bashed her head into a fluffy pillow before her mind could run away from her again, as it had so many times in the last hour. Warm fabric enfolded her face and she kept it there as her cheeks burned, determined not to let anyone see, only pulling back once the inexplicable urge passed. Bad Emerald. No shouting. Grandpa had done enough of that for the both of them. If one were to listen closely, she could have sworn still heard him running around Vale hollering his head off, long after they'd gone back to the hideout. OZPIN. I have a granddaughter. Nope. Not her imagination, then. That was a thing. Summer. Do you hear? I have a grandson, too. Isn't wonderful? Mercury grumbled into an arm to hide his flush. Damn it. It's been hours. Is he ever going to stop? QROW. I have grandchildren. That's right. You heard me. They're adorable. I love them so much. Unlikely. Cinder groaned, rolling over where she lay. There's no stopping him when he's like this. He'll be at it all night. Emerald felt an unfamiliar heat crawl up her neck as she craned her head toward the window. They could hear him all the way out here. Seemed Grandpa had a healthy set of lungs. He sounded proud. Not that she blamed him. If she had any ... friends, she'd be shouting too. A faint pang of regret tugged at her. Friends would be nice. Maybe someday. Someday. The one-time urchin gave her head a mighty shake, trying to dispel such thoughts, but it was no use. Family. The word, the very concept, had already taken root deep inside of her heart. It refused to let go. Something had awakened in her. Never in her life had she wanted something so badly and never known until she received it. Any attempts on her part to dislodge such sentiment only made it dig in. She had a family. Just thinking of it drew a tiny smirk to her face. Before long it became a smile, followed by a giddy grin, the sort she'd not worn since she was a little girl. You see, Emerald's reasoning was simple. Naruto had adopted Cinder. She was his in all but BLD. He'd said as much. In turn, Cinder had taken her off the streets. From there it only took one tiny leap of logic to make sense of things. For if Naruto claimed to be her grandfather ... well, what did that make Cinder unto her? The answer was deceptively simple. It made Cinder ... her mother. Emerald kicked her legs and muffled a giggle into her pillow. Happy day. I always wanted a mother. A little girl in her head absolutely squealed with glee. And Cinder didn't deny it. Oh, sure, she had huffed and rolled her eyes at first, but she'd made no attempt to refuse his words. Even now, safely out of earshot, she'd not yet said anything to that effect. There was a part of her that feared she would, yet with each passing minute her fears shriveled away. It wasn't long before she felt bold enough to speak. Nor was she the only one affected. She poked her head up to see Cinder still sprawled in her own cot, staring blankly into a handheld mirror. Frustration was writ across every aspect of her face, from her golden eyes to her pursed lips. She tilted her head to the right, then the left now, scowling at her reflection as she failed to find any blemish within. Am I losing my touch? She muttered to herself. No, surely not. So, Emerald smacked her lips. Mercury gagged just out of sight. Prick. Screw him. Cinder made a noise of discontent. Do not call me that in public. ... but we're not in public right now. So, I can call you that now, right? Emerald hedged her next words. Jay, just so we're clear. Cinder made angry Cinder noises. You're not going to let this go, are you? He's infected you. Pleading red eyes met an amused gold. Eventually one of them yielded. They had to. Cinder set her mirror down and picked up a hairbrush. Come here. Emerald blinked. Ma'am, I am trying to be ... nice. Cinder seemed to physically struggle with the word before she spat it out. Do you wish to brush my hair or not? Emerald didn't need to be told thrice. She all but blurred into Cinder's bed. Such a child. Cinder huffed, yet nevertheless remained motionless. If I find a hair out of place. You won't. Emerald ran the brush through that ebony mane in slow, vertical S, careful not to tug. Cinder took great pride in her long tresses. She'd never let alone touch them before. That she was letting her do so now was a sure sign of her stress. Something had gotten to her. 2 guesses as to whom. First 2 didn't count. Gramps must have said something to her. Still, there was a part of Emerald that envied her longer hair. Maybe she should consider growing hers out. Once you've finished with mine, I'll start on yours. Cinder shattered her reverie like so much glass. It's time we tamed that rat's nest you call hair. Thanks. Emerald was only too happy to comply with the command. I'd like that. Cinder ... didn't really know how to be nice, but she was making an effort now. That mattered. It meant something. As she worked, Emerald cast about for Mercury. She needn't look far. He hadn't budged from where she'd left him. Even now he was staring into space as he lay on the floor, expression decidedly vacant. Until he raised a lone finger in salute. Yeah, he was fine. BSTRD. Well, at least she wasn't the odd one out. She knew he wouldn't be quiet for long, wasn't his style, that. So, Mercury drawled the word, speaking with great care. Is the plan still on, or what? A pillow smacked him in the face, muffling the rest of his words. Why would you say such a thing? Cinder lowered her arm. He knows everything. If I make even a single move, he'll tan my hide. What about Adam? Cinder scoffed. What about Adam? Fool can get himself killed for all I care. But you already have half the maiden power. Emerald pointed out. Why stop now? Surely he wouldn't mind if you finished what you started. Golden eyes regarded her over his shoulder. Yes, he would. He already knows. Emerald nearly missed a. You told him. What choice did I have? There Mstrs flung up her arms, an almost girlish flush in her face. It was that or. What? Mercury scoffed. Did dear all daddy threaten to spank you or something? Cinder didn't say a word. She didn't have to. Her expression was telling. Mercury topped back, howling with laughter. Emerald bit her lip to stifle a giggle. Best grandpa ever. Naruto's exultation was heard halfway round the world. I have grandchildren. Ruby considered herself a good girl. She did good things, fought bad people, and definitely didn't eat cookies before bedtime. Alright, maybe she'd fudged that last bit. 2 out of 3 wasn't bad, right? And yet, one little screw-up, a single good deed gone wrong, and her life was thrown out of whack. Life had been good. Life had been simple. Now she found that life torn 3 different ways, trapped between her coursework, the responsibility of being a team leader, and now her first job. She was only 15, for crying out loud. Too much? Geez, she grumbled to herself, you break one window and they throw the book at you. It wasn't that she disliked working for Naruto, she just didn't know the first thing about running a dust shop. Emphasis on running. Her body flitted to and fro, a whirl of red cloth and petals as she went about her work. Naruto had forbid her from running the till, claiming she was much too young. Ruby was grateful for that. Really, she was. She'd only just patched things up with Weiss a few days ago. Anyone outside that close-knit circle of friends and family would have proved far too difficult to enteat with. No sir, she wasn't ready to deal with customers yet. Nope. Unfortunately, that meant most of her tasks were menial ones by default. Sweep the floors, stock the shelves, sort the dust. That kind of thing. Was it wrong that she enjoyed the latter? Just a little. Sparks and Explosions was larger on the inside than it seemed from without. Most of its backroom consisted of towering shelves, each level labeled with an appropriate sealed container. It was here that Ruby spent most of her time, flitting to and fro like a hummingbird. A few cases had been knocked askew by the last battle, scattering their contents across the floor. Really, it was a miracle none of it had exploded. She supposed that had something to do with the mixture. Naruto had mentioning something about his dust being tamper-proof. There were so many different kinds here, even combinations she'd never seen before. She discovered one such stray crystal on the floor, a fist-sized jewel red as her namesake. Pale fingers picked it, held it between her fingers. She tilted it a little, grinning as it caught the light. Pretty. Even she could see there was something special about this bled. It was there in the way it shimmered, pulsing in her grasp like a tiny heartbeat, almost as it were happy to see her. Like it recognized her. She shook her head, dispelling such thoughts. Don't be silly. Dust was just dust and nothing more. It wasn't alive. It didn't have feeling. It certainly wasn't conscious. Right. So why did Naruto call it chakra dust? Did the name mean something? Now where the heck do you go? Silver eyes flitted left, then right, searching for its matching case. Red meant fire dust, so that meant it was probably on one of the upper shelves. Be careful back there. Naruto called from the front of the shop. Let me know if you can't reach anything. Ruby fumbled with the crystal for a moment, narrowly catching it. Okay. Her eyes caught an empty case on an upper level. She hopped in place, straining for it. Her fingers brushed the ridge outline of a case, unable to get a good grip. Ladder. Who needed a ladder? She didn't need a ladder. She was a big girl, she'd do this herself. No help for her. No sorry. HRRNGH. Her brow furrowed. Yet a little ... more ... Can't reach. I've got you. Her heart sipped a beat as strong hands settled under her shoulders and scooped her up into the air. They lifted her as father might his daughter, hoisting her with ease. Dick. She flailed for a moment, startled at having been caught out, but only a moment. Determined to see her task through, she reached the rest of the way and thumped the crystal into its padded case. It slotted in with a soft CLCK, then those strong arms reeled her back in, setting her down on the floor once more. Thanks, she muttered, unwilling to meet his eyes. Don't worry about it. Naruto sauntered back the way he'd come with a merry whistle, leaving Ruby with her thoughts. Holler if you need me. Ruby stared after him, gone red in the face. She wasn't stupid. She'd seen the old photos back at the house, noticed the way Mom looked at them. Those whiskered cheeks, so much like her own, yet with 3 marks instead of 2. And the way he acted around her, well, that was a dead giveaway. Could he be? Was he? Ruby wanted to believe. Really, she did. She knew so little about her father. Mom had said he was something of a free spirit, but any other details were sparse. Unbidden, her mind flitted back to their first meeting. When they'd met that night during the robbery, he'd been surprised to see her. Shocked, as if he didn't even know she existed. What kind of parent was that? Had things really been so bad between him and Mom that they hadn't talked for 15 years? Neither had outright said anything to her about it, which left her uncertain. And in that uncertainty, a thorn of fear caught at her heart. Just who was he, really? The door chimed once, heralding another customer. Welcome, welcome. Naruto's voice was warmth and friendliness personified. What can I get you? Oh. His words frosted over, going from sunny to glacial in an instant. Look who the cat dragged in. I could say the same of you. A sharp, almost nasally voice intoned. To think I'd find you here. Ruby scuttled out of the back and peeked halfway around the corner. There was someone there all right, but he didn't much look like a customer. If anything, he reminded her of one of those solicitors that used to pester them before they moved out to Patch, the kind that wouldn't take no for an answer. Clad in a crisp white suit with a bristle snow-white mustache and hair to match, he was every but a businessman through and through. His eyes were chips of wintry ice, Weiss at her worst. Wait, why am I thinking of Weiss? There he stood, flanked by no less than 10 men, each wearing a pale blue suit of their own. They didn't look like good men. I understand you struck 2 of my employees. Their leader's voice was crisp, almost nasally. May I ask why? A faint smile creased Naruto's lips. I wouldn't say struck, Jack. You know what you did. Do I? The blonde tilted his head just so. I'm afraid I haven't the foggiest idea what you mean. You shoved a man's head up. Right. The whiskered warrior snapped his fingers. I remember. Those 2. They started it. His smile gained an edge. Just as Roman started this mess. Seems everyone wants a piece of me these days. Ruby perked up. Roman. Torchwick had tried to rob this place, but still. In any case, it doesn't matter. Naruto's resonant voice snapped her back to reality. We both know you don't care about your lackeys. No, and here he shook his head. You're here because I gave you an excuse. That's all you ever needed. I suppose you think you're clever. Jack sneered. Don't you? Ain't strong when dealin' with you. The shopkeeper hummed. Weiss didn't get her brains from your sorry hide. Jack spat at his feet. Filthy cur. Naruto's rejoinder proved just as swift. Arrogant little sit. Ruby muffled a squeak behind her palms. This was Weiss's dad. Oh gods, she thought the name sounded familiar. Jack Schnee, head of the SDC, ricest man in the world. What was he doing in Vale? An awful pit opened in her stomach. She had a bad feeling about this. An awful, terrible feeling. Jack confirmed her fears a moment later when he pulled a piece of paper from his jacket. 3 rapid steps carried him to Naruto's desk, where he thumped it down. I'm here to shut you down. Blue eyes traveled to the document in question. As of today, the SDC owns this entire city block. Your shop included. Well, she certainly had her answer now. Naruto blinked once. Oh, you think so, Jack? Insolent cur. A hand struck his face. You think you're so big? A blonde brow quirked, framing a devilish grin. Your wife certainly thought so. The world fell silent. And then, you dare. Ruby's yelp was concealed by the man's roar. Oh, I dared plenty. Naruto's smile was nothing short of smug now, the sort Young wore when she pulled off a particularly clever pun. Up, down, sideways. When the stunned businessman didn't answer, he only laughed at him. Still don't get it. The smugness in his smile was so thick Crescent Rose would have snapped upon it. We did the horizontal dance. His fingers wiggled in a lewd motion anyone with half a brain would recognize. I bonked her brains out. She screamed by name. Jack reeled back on his heels. When? Where? How? Now there's a proper question. Naruto tilted his head a fraction of a degree to the right. How old is Winter again? Jack turned an alarming shade of puce. Ruby would have giggled if she weren't so terrified. Surely I would have noticed. You would have, Naruto conceded with a nod, if you were even a remotely decent father. But then again, you haven't realized you're sterile yet. Or, he snapped his fingers, and stop me if you've heard this one before, but when was the last time you touched your wife? That's absurd. Jack's brow shot into his hairline. That is. He fumbled for words, and failed to find them. What have you done to me? Genjutsu's a heady thing. Fortunately for you, I'm handy with disguises, and Willow adores her children. Naruto gave a half-hearted shrug. Or should I say our children? Ruby heard Jack throat close from here. Winter's the only one aware of it, naturally. Still the blonde prattled on. And the only one with whiskered cheeks, though that's nothing little makeup couldn't fix. Weiss and Whitley won the genetic lottery there. They don't suspect a thing. He chuckled a little at some unspoken joke, then. Did you know Weiss actually tried to buy me out? The gall. Why tell me this? Because, Naruto said calmly, turnabout is fair play. And no one will believe you. You. Jack sputtered, reminding Ruby of a small white field mouse trying to puff itself up when faced with a fox. You're lying. You're trying to rile me up. He adjusted his coat and harumphed. That's all this is. You have no proof. Why are you taking out your scroll? He flailed his arms. Stop that. Stop it at once. I am talking. Are you? Naruto looked up from his phone. I hadn't noticed. Excuse me a moment, would you? I need to take this. As Ruby looked on aghast, he pressed it to his ear. Jack howled. Listen to me. Naruto held up a finger for silence. You. Hello, Willow. Uzumaki's face lit up like the sun. You have perfect timing. Jack died a little on the inside. Ruby saw it in his face. I hate to burst your bubble, Naruto cooed, ignoring the man utterly. But I'm afraid we have a bit of a problem. A pause followed. No, everything still works fine. Yes, we're still on for next weekend. He twirled a tan finger idly in the air. Oh, white lace. That's nice. Might have to pay Atlas a visit. With each word, Jack grew paler still. Look, I've got your rat BSTRD of a husband here in my shop. Although I suppose he's about to be your ex-husband. Jack foamed at the mouth. What's that? Sure. Naruto held out his scroll. She wants to talk to you. I've put her on speaker. Trembling fingers accepted the scroll. There was a silence. And then, hello, BSTRD. Oh, he looked angry. UWHR. How dare you? How dare I? How dare you? You married me for my last name. Used me. Abused me. Is it any wonder I'd cast you aside at the first opportunity? The woman's voice was decidedly smug, waspish even. My children were never yours. Telling you that after all these years gives me more pleasure than 1,000 bottles of wine. I'll have you sued for this. Dear Jack, I'll be incredibly surprised if you survive the next 5 minutes. Ruby couldn't hear the rest of what was said. Their words dissolved into a shouting match after that, but whatever it was turned the already pale man positively pallid. How dare you? Jack ended the call and launched the scroll at him. I'll see you on the streets for this. No. Naruto caught it and stowed it effortlessly. You won't do that. I could have you killed. Here and now. You think I won't? You could. He received a nod. But you won't. And why is that? Because you remind me of someone. He had a stick up his arse, too. A hand swept out, clearing the counter. This man thought all the world was his oyster, that people were his to do with as he pleased. He pillaged and plundered wherever and whenever he saw fit, never once feeling guilty for those he hurt. Blue eyes FLC curled a faint shade of gold as orange dusted his eyelids. Would you like to know his name? Ruby certainly would. He sounded like a bad guy in need of a good thrashing. Jack gulped. No, I think not. Naruto's smile had entirely too many teeth. Ruby whimpered a little at the light burning in his eyes. His name was Garu. The man who might be her father steeped his fingers and laid his chin atop them. A seedy little worm of a businessman, just like you. Jack shrank back, but Naruto made no move to engage in the least. His life was most irrelevant in the grand scheme of things, but his end wasn't. You see, he thought he could take over a tiny little country called Wave. Does this story have a point? Are you dictating your obituary to me? Patience. Naruto temporized with a raised hand. we're just getting to the good part. Ruby wondered if she could call an ambulance, but not for him. Yet she couldn't bring herself to pull her scroll. So, Naruto clapped his hands, startling the lot of them. Gato, real scum of the earth. He got away with it for a while, because let's face it, money talks. But eventually the people he sought to oppress rose up against him. He died at the hands of a demon, screaming and squealing for his life like the little pig he was. Jack had begun to sweat now. Demons don't exist. You have no idea. You live in a world of gods and monsters. Ruby shrank back a little, not liking the sound of those words. Not one bit. I was just a boy back then, but Gato's death really resonated with me, you know. Naruto mimed a gun with his fingers and pressed it to his temple. Men go to prison. Dogs get put down. But you're not even a dog, Jack. Here at last he stood, towering over the little man. You're a rat. Still, you've caught me on a good day. A hand snaked out, catching him by the face. You see, his fingers dug into the man's pasty visage. I recently learned that I'm a father again, so for the sake of the very naughty daughter who's been watching us for the better part of 5 minutes now. Ruby squeaked and ducked out of sight. Busted. And wait, had he just called her his? I'm going to give you one chance to undo your mistake. With her line of sight denied, she only had their voices to go by. Leave Atlas. Leave Willow. She heard Naruto release Jack, heard the spindly little man all but stumble back. Renounce all claims to the Schnee name and go into hiding. Do that, and I'll let you walk out with your dignity intact. Silence swelled in the room. Jack croaked into it. Shoot him. Ruby's head snapped towards them. What, sir? One of his guards saw her at last and bridled. Shoot him. Jack stabbed a finger at Naruto. I want him dead. But the noise. Frantic eyes cut toward Ruby herself and the weapon on her back. There's a witness. Kill her, too. This is a bad neighborhood. His smile was nothing short of greasy. We'll blame their deaths on the White Fang or some such. Such a shame. For the first time since she'd met him, Naruto stopped smiling. Very poor choice of words, there. I'll have to tell Kali. What the hell is a Kali? Naruto's smile returned tenfold. A story for another time. It was the straw that broke the camel's back. Shoot him now. 10 pistols barked in seamless unison. 10 bullets met empty air. 10 men screamed as Naruto all but materialized beside the nearest gunman, swept the man's legs, caught him by the collar as he fell, and swung him around like a flail into his fellows. Bones cracked horribly, smashing several of them aside. One particularly unlucky grunt crashed through the recently repaired window, shattering it once more. Ruby made a keening noise through her teeth. Not again. Naruto's voice overrode it with a mighty bellow. Damn it, I just had that thing fixed. Stop blowing holes in my shop. You're the one who hit him. He whirled just as the others reloaded, effortlessly interposing his captive's body between him and harm's way. The poor thug bucked in his grasp as hot dust seared into his body, yet failed to penetrate. The blonde grinned and bowled forward with his impromptu shield. Clawed fingers closed around another's weapon, yanked it from his grasp, and turned it on him. Remember that bit when I said that I considered guns uncivilized? The harsh CLCK of a round entering the chamber filled the room. I lied. The dust pistol barked twice, felling its former owner. He wasn't alone. Banzai. Hirama crashed down from the second floor, flattening 2 more despite his slight size. The poor gunman struck the floor with a dry wheeze, even as their compatriots drew a bead on him. That was all Ruby needed to see. She dove in with a yell, sighed SWNGNG. Crescent Rose became a hurricane of crimson, mowing them down, so much wheat from chaff. It was all downhill after that, even as she caught them with the blunt end of their weapon, sending them crashing into the street. She heard the harsh crack of a weapon and knew that the rest had fallen. Fools, you'll never work in Atlas again. Jack fumbled for a pistol in his coat, only for his faltering fingers to fail him. Blast it. Just you wait. I'll show you. I'm tired of waiting, of seeing people be unhappy. Naruto caught him by the throat and wrenched him down, splintering the floor with the sheer impact. He took that happiness from Willow. Now I'm going to take something from you. How's your dignity sound? Jack thrashed in his grasp as he looked on. You'll rue the day you crossed me. An open palm cracked across the Schnee's face. Say it. No. Naruto slapped him again, denting his face. Say it. Biwuje. Another smack sent teeth flying through the air, punctuated by a squeal. Naruto struck him again, followed by a 5th blow. 6, 7 now. I can do this all day, Jack. Ruby was tempted to let him. She stood by with arms crossed. I'm sorry, Jack wailed as an 8th backhand rocked his rapidly swelling face, lisping through hideously bruised cheeks. Forgive me. I'll cancel the contract. Let me go. Naruto's brow furrowed. I think ... not. I'm not done with you yet. A 9th blow sent the wretch spiraling into unconsciousness. Naruto released him then, to which Jack struck to the ground with a dull thud. He didn't rise again. Just like that, silence pervaded the dust shop. Ruby dithered in, feeling every bit a naughty child, knees twisting to and fro with thinly veiled anxiety. Crescent Rose collapsed into its portable form on her back. Even that noise seemed to echo in the quiet that followed. So, she swallowed once. What you said. Naruto perked up, more a reflexive twitch than anything else. It nearly undid her, and yet Ruby couldn't bring herself to say it. The word lodged in her throat, choking her. No, she pushed through the doubt, the pain, the fear, and it burst out of her. Daddy. It was the whimper of a little girl who'd gone without one for far too long. Yeah. That's me. He looked away with an awkward chuckle and scratched at his cheek. Guess I've got some explaining to do, huh? The blonde stood slowly as Kurama dragged bodies away in the background. Don't suppose a lifetime's worth of dust would make up for all those missed birthdays. Ruby giggled in a fit of hysterics. She wasn't sure if she wanted to laugh or cry. How about this, then? He opened his arms wide. Wanna hug it out? Silver eyes fluttered in a rapid blink. Just like that. He grinned. Hugs make everything better. It was such a dad thing to say, so much so that it broke down the last of her defenses. Ruby lost control. She dove forward with a sob, crashing into him in a flurry of crimson petals. Rather than endure it, Naruto caught her under the arms and swept her into a crushing hug. She buried her head into his chest, stifling a sniffle. 15 years. 15 years of not knowing, of guessing and wondering and suspecting, but never having. And now she did, like she'd found a missing piece of herself. He was right. Hugs really did make everything better. That was amazing. Words flew from her mouth as she babbled unrestrained. He took them apart like it was nothing. You're the best. Realization dawned a heartbeat later. Wait, does this mean Weiss is my sister? Naruto sighed. Ruby, no. She grinned up at him. Ruby, yes. The door crashed open before he could get a word in edgewise. From her sprawled position in Naruto's arms, Ruby had a perfect view of it all as her mother came barreling in, weapon in hand. Oh, right. It was about time for her to pick her up, wasn't it? I heard gunshots. Summer cried. What on earth? She took a look at the bodies. Hell happened. Blinked twice. ... Here. Did I miss something? She planted a hand on her hip, just now noticing Ruby in his arms. Wait, you told her, didn't you? Naruto's grin was utterly unapologetic. Pretty much. Ruby dared a tentative little wave at her mother. A slow smile spread across Summer's face. Well, that simplifies things, doesn't it? Ruby wasn't sure she liked the look in her mama's eyes just then. It was an expression she'd never seen before. Really, it almost looked like hunger, but that couldn't be right. Why would Mom be hungry? There wasn't any food around here, just dust, and oh, she understood no. Summer surged forward and tackled Dad. She embraced him fiercely, slamming him down to the floor. No more beating around the bush. The words were a growl. Mind. Hey-oh. Naruto barked a laugh. Not in front of Ruby. Ruby reared back, eyes bulging in her head. There could be only one response. EWWW. Gross. Ruby Rose wanted to scream. Not out of fear, or hate, or even sadness, really. Nope. You see, she had a different reason altogether for wanting to holler at the top of her lungs. She skipped through the halls of a beacon, recalling last night with mostly fond memories. Mostly, she said, because frankly seeing her parents embrace Nope wasn't an event she wanted to remember anytime soon. Unbidden, her mind flitted back to the conversation they'd had just last night, just the three of them. There will always be another monster, Ruby. That's what people fail to realize. Naruto sighed as he pushed a glass of warm milk her way. Sometimes, you need a monster to keep other monsters away. Ruby took it, letting the mug warm her cold hands. And that's what you are. Good girl. He patted her head, tousling her hair. You're learning. Her nose wrinkled. How many siblings do I have? Well, more than you'd think, less than you'd expect. She huffed. Dad. That's hardly an answer. Summer shrugged. It's the best you'll get. She had more siblings now. Once upon a time that might have made her antsy, seeded her heart with doubt and poisoned her from within. Now, nope. Mom and Dad had been separated for 15 years, the better part of 2 decades. Really, the past was the past so far as she was concerned. They were back together again now. Nothing else mattered. Well, maybe a few things. Things involving the scowling girl walking only 2 paces ahead of her. Because Weiss was her sister, which also meant this winter and Whitley Naruto kept mentioning were family, too. She'd always wanted a big family. Just the thought of it left the little Reaper giddy. Now remember, Ruby. Dad's voice came back to her all at once. You can't tell Weiss about this. This is something she needs to figure out on her own. Ruby respected that. Really, she did. She wouldn't tell her, of course, not when Dad wanted to drop that bomb herself. But it was so strong. Everywhere she looked she seemed to find relatives she'd never known about. At this rate, Blake going to be her sister, too. She missed a step, frowned a little. Wait a minute. Dad had mentioned the name Kali Belladonna back in the shop. Blake's last name was Belladonna. Her mind leaped to the immediate conclusion. Weiss saw her smile and scowled. Why are you grinning? You've been like this all morning. Ruby giggled. No reason. Nope, no reason at all. Blake's bow twitched. Are you sure? Ruby absolutely beamed. Yup. Young sighed. Ruby, tell you later, sis. The little Reaper grinned and skipped ahead of them. Come on, we're gonna be late for class. She didn't see Young linger behind Weiss and Blake. Certainly, she didn't hear her words. I have a bad feeling about this. While the children are away, the adults will lay. Was it the saying? Wasn't it play? Naruto supposed it didn't matter. Lay they had. Him and Summer, over and over again until they lost count, until their bodies were pleasantly sore yet sated betwixt the sheets of his bed. He cast a weather eye about, wincing at the mess they'd made. He didn't recall much of the last 3 hours, but now that they'd come down from their high he realized his bedroom was an absolute ruin. In all due fairness, they did have 15 years to make up for. A little bit of destruction was to be expected. Anticipated, even. Shame about their clothes, though. Total loss there. Summer tucked her head into his bare chest, silver eyes half-lidded in post-coital bliss. Much better. Why did I ever give this up again? Speaking of which, Summer, no. Naruto swatted her in a way when it began to trail lower. Give me a second to catch my breath, for crying out loud. ... Is that long enough? Not again. Kurama howled from downstairs. Insatiable, the both of you. Book a hotel or something. Fine. The huntress subsided with a huff. So, how many? Like mother like daughter. Naruto feigned ignorance, creaking a blue eye open. How many what? Don't play coy with me, mister. She tucked herself into his side, all but spooning against him. I know you held back earlier for Ruby's sake, but really. Her body shifted against his, all but sprawling across his chest. How many sisters did you give my girls? Even a daft man could have felt the intent in her words. Do you want the abridged version? Naruto. He held up both hands, fingers fully splayed on all but one. Summer squeaked. Thine. Did you even wait after we? I did. For an entire year. You were the one who backed away, remember. Here at last, he felt a rare touch of anger. Don't go accusing me now. I take care of my own. If I'd known Ruby was mine, I would have come flying back into her life ages ago. But someone didn't want to see. I'm sorry. The faint chime of the doorbell below demanded their attention. Summer groaned. Nuo ... don't want to get up. Naruto flung his senses outward and recognized the presence below. All three of them. A wicked idea bit him and didn't let go. He just thought of a way to lift her spirits and deflect her anger all at once. Did you know I adopted one, and she kinda adopted two more? When she didn't respond, he did her hair. Kinda makes me a grandfather, you know. And you a grandmother by proxy. Summer perked up. Grandbabies. Yup, that's them downstairs. A shiver passed through her. All at once she sprang upright. I wanna see. Clothes. Naruto hollered before she could bolt downstairs. Summer stalked back with a growl. Fine. Gimme one of your old outfits. Cinder hadn't come this far by being a fool. Naruto had taught her many a thing since he'd taken her under his wing, chief among them the ability to sense danger. It was a skill that had served her well as she grew into a young woman, if only because it helped her to otherwise avoid those who were hopelessly out of her league. And when Summer Rose came barreling through that door, nope, Cinder took one look at her and responded accordingly. She did what must be done. She did not hesitate. She showed no mercy. Meaning, here, she threw Emerald and Mercury under the bus. Her minion children barely had time to stiffen as she placed a palm against each of their backs and moved them forward. Emerald offered the least resistance, not quite realizing the danger before her. More fool she. It was she who fell first. Mercury had the good sense to at least dig his heels in and avoided being glomped altogether. They're adorable. Summer all but squealed. Let's me have a look at you. Emerald squeaked as Summer pinched her cheeks. Mercury sniggered at her expressed discomfort. Heh, busted. Silver eyes swiveled toward him. I'm sorry, did I say something that you found funny? Come here. Are you eating enough? Cinder slunk away in the chaos. Time to make her escape. She could always visit father when that thing wasn't here. Summer's arm looped around her neck. And where do you think you're going? Cinder recoiled with a start, but it was too late. Her legs betrayed her, gone stiff as stone. Her mind bleated out a wild panicked note of dismay. That was all she managed before the silver-eyed terror was upon her. Naruto poked his head out the door, took one look at them, and darted back inside. Cinder glared glowing golden daggers at her fool of a father. Traitor. While a cheerily cheeky Summer fussed and fretted over Cinder and company, Naruto slipped back inside. He eased the door to the shop shut behind him, then locked it for good measure. All right, then. Keen blue eyes surveyed the recently repaired shelves and the proud product placed within. The dust sang pleasantly to his ears, humming with trace amounts of chakra. Ruby had done good work here. Everything looked good as new. There wasn't so much as a speck of dirt to be seen. Not a hair out of place. And yet it was quiet. Too quiet. He sensed something in the stillness. Kurama uttered a jaw-popping yawn from where he lay on the counter. Finally noticed it? Have you? How could he not? Negative intent pervaded the shop, and none of it stemmed from those without. His gaze swept toward the right, regarding a tidy little corner. In hindsight, he couldn't say what fell off about it, only that something did. He took one step forward, then another, a third now, careful to block their escape with his body. So, his voice rang out into the silence. How long do you plan on hiding? Nothing happened. Not a peep. Not a sound. ... Maybe he was losing his touch in old age. Perhaps his mind was playing tricks on him ... Not bloody likely. He slammed his hands together, to which a harsh pulse of chakra burst from his palms and rippled across the room. It was an old trick, one that still served him well from time to time, and it did so now. With a faint sound like shattering glass, she appeared. Huh. Kurama raised his head and CC-ketted to one side like the fox he was. These kids keep getting weirder and weirder. She certainly was an odd one. Naruto took her in at a glance, noting pink and brown hair, mismatching eyes that seemed to FLC her with fear when he stared at them overlong. Her clothing was a mad medley of black and white pink, matching the strange parasol she hung overhead. As he looked on the girl stoated at her side. Yet this was not a girl. A child wouldn't have those kind of curves. A child wouldn't stalk toward him, her eyes angry FLC curring slits of anxiety. Yet she didn't speak, not going to say anything. She scowled and stabbed a finger to her mouth. Oh, he blinked, feeling mildly chagrined. You can't, can you? Her free hand fished a scroll forth from her pocket and held it up for him to see. 3 little words awaited him within. Leave Roman alone. His smile shriveled up, taking his goodwill with it. You're one of his, then. Her head bobbed. What do I call you? She traced 3 letters in the air with a finger. N-E-O. Another nod. She had moxie if nothing else. The scroll flashed out again. He's my dum-dum. Well, wasn't that curious? He planted his feet while he jammed both hands in his pockets, subtly strengthening his stance. And what does he do you? Her brow furrowed. This time the text was downright speedy. Everything. One of those, then. Is that so? She nodded anew. Kurama scoffed from his perch. You chose poorly, then. Neo's head whipped toward the tiny kitsune's false form, eyes wide. Credit where it was due, she recovered quickly. Out came the scroll once more. She seemed to hesitate this time before she steeled herself and showed it to him once more. I want a truce. Naruto's brow shot into his hairline. So nice to see someone sensible in Roman's organization. Unfortunately, it was much too late to make this go away. Maybe if this Neo had come to them immediately after Roman's little escapade ... but no. I'm sorry, little one. He shook his head. That's not going to happen. She scowled and was quick to key in another message. Tell me how to make this stop, then. How? A frown marred his whiskered cheeks. You bring him here and this stops. I'm not emotional about the money or even the damage. His finger jabbed at her. There is a price indebted to me for the BLD I've gotten on my hands restoring order to the untidiness that your boss created. She gulped. He saw her throat rise and fall. If not for Roman, he wouldn't have come back in the first place, just as he wouldn't have taught Junior a lesson. Jack wouldn't dare rear his ugly head. But he did, and he had. More was yet to come, and he couldn't stop this train now even if he wanted to. And make no mistake, he didn't. ... Will you kill him? Haven't decided yet. He was honest, if nothing else. She scowled and stomped a heel. Her scroll cracked in her hand, revealing a fractured message. It was just a dust shop. Kurama sighed. You just had to press that button, didn't you? Just a dust shop, you say. An old ember of anger sprang to life in Naruto's heart. Just a dust shop. No. EFLC had a hand outward, slapping her scroll away. To you maybe. Cold blue eyes followed her as she gave it up and scrambled back. But to me, this place is everything. I sank my life savings into this place. I worked strong to get here, to get out of that old life. I'm proud of it. His brow turned stormy. And then in a single night, your boss took that from me. Stole that from me. He stalked forward. Killed that from me. Neo tripped and fell on her rear, scrambling back now like a drunken crab. Everyone's been asking me if I'm back, if I'm going to remind everyone who I am. And until now. His hand shot down, grabbing her by the collar. I haven't really had an answer. But yeah, I'm thinking I'm back. His forehead embraced hers in a savage headbutt, stunning her. So you tell me where Roman is, you bring him here and make him pay his dues, or so help me when I find him, you will die screaming alongside him. He flung her to the ground. Now get out before I lop off your petty little head. Neo didn't need to be told twice. She vanished in a crackle of glass. Almost immediately, a harsh clamor rose outside. Naruto pivoted on one heel to regard it. For the love of... He bowled outside, fearing the worst. Several things happened at once. Move. Cinder all but shouldered past him, seeking shelter inside. Naruto was inclined to let her, seeing as Summer was somewhat distracted at the moment. He peered past her, beheld a white-on-blue vest with a matching skirt, flowing up into a familiar face framed by hair white as snow and keen blue eyes besides. Just as well, too, because those eyes weren't focused on him. If they were, he expected they'd be a great deal warmer. Right now, they were chips of pure ice. Hello, Summer. Ruby's mother lifted her chin. Willow. You look well, for a drunk, and you look well for a woman who's supposed to be dead. Willow tilted her head just so. How many times have you died again? Her eyes flitted past, alighted upon him, and she tried to step around her. Step aside, I'm not here for you. Summer wasn't having it, she all but blocked her with both arms. Why you? At least I didn't let myself be used by a pig like Jack. Naruto and Kurama winced as one. Willow's once pleasant smile became brittle as a blizzard. My, I'd choose your words carefully, were I you. Wouldn't want to say something you'd regret. Sure, great, just my luck. Naruto's palm struck his forehead with an audible smack. We're going to do this now, are we? Summer and Willow butted heads. We certainly are. Stop blowing holes in my shop. In hindsight, perhaps it was too much to hope Willow and Summer wouldn't argue. Naruto ducked, caught a vial of dust as it whistled past his head, and set it down on the table with a withering glower. Both women subsided and sank into their seats. His sole solace in this was the seclusion of his shop, in that he'd somehow managed to get both of them inside and the wine out, before all hell broke loose. But really, could one blame them for fighting? Willow got to see him nearly every week, and Naruto suspected that would soon become a daily occurrence now that Jack had been outed while Summer only just reconciled with him. She'd stumbled back into his life by pure chance. One had nothing to prove, the other 15 years to make up for. And yet for all that, they were, each of them, mothers. Wars had been started over less. I was first. Summer's hand slammed down on the table, rattling the glasses he'd laid out for them. For a moment, her silver eyes almost seemed to FLC her with inner flame before she brought herself back under control. Her smile was sweet, but her voice promised murder in its purest form. Even a Jinchuriki knew better than to interfere in a conflict like this. Best to let them have it out and be done with it. So you were. Willow offered a languid smile as she raised a flute of wine to her lips. She took a long moment to savor it. Only then did she continue. But you let him slip through your fingers and shatter. Her head tilted a fraction of an inch, strands of white hair concealing her left eye. It fell to me to pick up the pieces. Didn't it, dear? Naruto looked away and coughed into a fist. Leave me out of this. Summer flinched. I made a mistake. Yes, you did. Willow granted her a nod. A mistake of your own making. Kurama whistled in the background. Then I need some healing chakra for that burn. How long was it? Willow's anger had ever been a cold sort. She didn't burn bright like Summer. Her ire, when roused, was a frigid thing indeed. Oh, yes, 15 years. Not a call, not a text, nothing. She raised a hand and conjured a glyph to her fingers, then made a show of inspecting it. You shut him out. And for what? A twist of her wrist warped it yet further, conjuring a pair of ghostly white figures in the palm of said hand. One vanished, leaving the other alone. Your precious worldview, for your belief in black and white. When her fingers moved, they danced to her tune. He gave you his heart. And you. Her fist closed, emitting a crackling noise. Shattered it. Summer shook with every word. Willow showed no mercy. He cried. Did you know that? Summer made a wounded noise and rounded on him. You did. Once. Naruto injected a kernel of truth into her diatribe. I was drunk at the time. Regardless, she could not live with her own failure. Willow tutted. Where did that bring her? Back to you. Wintry blue eyes met hers until she looked away. That still doesn't give you the right to bully her like this. Apologize. I will, once I've said my piece. She huffed. You're hardly to blame. Her eyes slid back to Summer, eliciting a squeak from the slight huntress. You hurt him so very badly. Is it any wonder he'd seek out someone who knew the same pain? Someone who would never, ever betray him. Summer's hands bit into the table. We're together now. I don't doubt that. Willow allowed. He always was soft. But how am I to know you won't leave him again? It was the straw that broke the camel's back. Naruto saw it a moment before it happened and managed to rescue the glasses before she did something rash. Summer, don't. Too late. The cloaked huntress surged out of her seat with a snarl, grabbed the table separating her from Willow, and flung it away as though it weighed no more than a pack of matchsticks. It struck the door and bounced off, shredding itself apart as it skittered across the floor. Blast it. He'd like that table. Oh ho. For her part, Willow remained seated, lips quirked into a small smile. You're coming closer. After his warning, Summer cracked her knuckles. I can't kick your butt without getting closer. Willow spread her arms wide. Then come as close as you like. Do you even know how to fight, you drunken? A glyph swept Summer upright and appended her onto the floor. Willow hadn't budged an inch. Care to repeat yourself? Yeah, Naruto shrugged. She's pretty much the definition of a white mage. The phone rang, shattering the moment. He all but dove on it. Sparks and explosions. He plastered a smile to his face as he drawled into the receiver. How can I help you? Hello again, old friend. A low Australian purr answered. You seem to be in better spirits today. His smile died an ugly death. Again, Malachite. You already called me to express your condolences. What do you want? Willow arched a demure brow. Summer's head hit her hands, anger momentarily forgotten. Not another one. She isn't. He bit out before returning his attention to the call. Why are you calling again? Come now, don't be so cold. Little Miss sounded far too pleased for her own good, which usually boded poorly for him. I'm simply repaying a favor from one friend to another. My girls told me a fascinating story just last night. There was a hint of something in her tone that had him bridling. Melanie saw this fascinating bird roosting down by the northern docks. Isn't that remarkable? He physically felt Summer stiffen behind him. Wasn't strong to see through the double-speak. Hero. Not likely. Didn't sound like his usual dive. Which meant something altogether unpleasant. His BLD turned to ice ... then superheated plasma. It certainly is. And what would the name of this bashful bird be? No need to beat around the bush. I know you've been looking for her. She's got a bounty on her head. Her. Definitely not Kuro. I have, and she does is, he allowed. She's being difficult. And whose fault is that? Maybe you taught her to hide a little too well. He'd made many mistakes. Teaching her had been one of them. She'd been willing at the time, but she'd learned a little too well. He had also learned Little Miss didn't give her information freely. What do I owe you for this? Not a thing. She sounded like the cat who caught the canary and slaughtered its entire family. Your little stunt with Junior weakened his gang and gave my spiders a chance for a little aggressive expansion down in South Vale. Do be nicer to your nieces next time though, won't you? They're quite cross with you for knocking them around like that. He fought down a wince. It was that or kill them. ... Fair enough. I'll be in touch. Naruto hung up with a heavy heart. One mistake, one slip, and his past came crawling out of the woodwork to torment him. DMN Roman. If he didn't hate him before, he did now. A harsh crack behind him told him Summer and Willow had resumed their hostilities with a vengeance. This is just not my day. Today was definitely her day. Ruby skipped down the street, smiling fit to burst. She'd done it. She'd finally done it. It had taken no small part of begging, cajoling, even outright bribery on Blake's part to get her team down here, but here they were. She could see the shop in the distance, less than a block away. A few more steps now, just a little more. Then she'd finally accomplish her mission, even if meant Yang giving her the stink eye. You're doing it again. She hummed a little. Doing what? Weiss absolutely hissed. That. Stop smiling. Ruby bounded forward, laughing as a glyph hurtled by. Blake saw the chance for what it was and took it. She frowned at her. You're up to something. Ruby only hummed. Nope. She certainly was. Are you done? Naruto danged Willow and Summer in the air by the back of their necks, holding them as one might a pair of naughty kittens. That, or two grown women covered in dust and dirt. They didn't look much pleased with him at the moment. Fitting, because he was none too happy with them himself. I think you're done. He snarled. I just cleaned this place up and now you've... The bell above the door chimed, heralding a new arrival. He rounded on with a snarl. We're closed. In the same moment, someone spoke. I'd like a full magazine of dust, please. Boy, I just said we were. Naruto looked up and froze. I already heard you, Blake. Wait. Now that he looked at Blake, really looked at her without anyone in the way, he noticed something. She looked just like Kali had when she was younger. Paler perhaps, without an impish gleam in her eye, but... No, there was just no bloody way. He had all of half a second to see a shock of blonde hair behind her before the door opened again as Weiss charged in behind her. Kali? Excuse me. Young Belladonna frowned and the image in his mind's eye shattered at once. Why do you know my mother's name? She saw Willow dangling from his fist. Froze, looked like she'd bitten into a lemon. Mother, what's the meaning of this? Willow offered a demure smile. Hello, dear. You really do have impeccable timing. Ruby poked her head around Weiss with a happy cheer-up. Suo, do I have the best timing or what? Everyone exhaled as one. Ruby, why? Yang considered herself a free-spirited girl. Live fast, die strong, that sort of thing, you know. No point in worrying about rules. Don't sweat the small stuff. If you have a problem, punch it. Such a philosophy had served her well so far in life, and why wouldn't it? She hadn't met an obstacles that she couldn't punch her way through yet. 9 times out of 10. Ember Celica and her semblance carried the day. She was content with that. What would be would ... Well, be. Was it reckless? Definitely. Summer had told her off for it more than once, but it was the only way Yang knew how to live. Summer wasn't really her mom. Not by BLD. She'd taken her and after that beach raven. Threw her away without so much as a goodbye. Yang was grateful for that. Really, she was. Summer was a super mom. Best gosh darn mom a girl could ask for. But sometimes she wondered. ... Who was her father? Dad hadn't been in the picture long. She didn't even know who he was. Mom said it might be someone named Tai, and hey, maybe it was, but she didn't know. She didn't have any memories of him, either. Because Tai was dead, too. He'd gone off on a mission and never returned. She vaguely recalled a smiling man with blonde hair and blue eyes patting her head. Even now his face was fuzzy to her. She tried not to dwell on it. No point in crying over spilled milk. Raven was the one she had a problem with, not a deceased dad. So, yeah, free spirit and all that. But this was a little too cavalier even for her. Didn't mean she wouldn't laugh at it, though. Wait. She hid a snicker behind her hand and raised the other. Let me get this straight, old man. And DM Fussy Britches here, she pointed at Weiss. Is your kid? A hand felt a mere tenester. Zio Long, you do realize I am armed. Whatever you say, Weiss cream. A smile touched her lips. Seriously, though. Her gaze sought out the adults. Summer looked chagrined about all this yet resigned, while Weiss' mom, what was her name again? Willow, seemed insufferably smug as she sprawled in a nearby chair. Naruto appeared to be caught somewhere in between the two, which suggested he'd know this for a while. Evidently Weiss didn't. Hold out your hand if you don't believe me. He offered her his palm. Your chakra should confirm it. Or would you prefer a DNA test? Weiss eyed him as one might a snake in the grass. What in blazes is this chakra you speak of? And I refuse to hold your... Willow CLC cut her tongue in mild disapproval. Weiss, all right. At her mother's command, the younger Schnee flinched and started forward. Fine, let's be done with this face. Here. Her hand smacked into Naruto's palm with an audible pop. See, she huffed when nothing happened. This is pointless. I feel fine. Now let's be done with this. Prank. Her words trailed off, eyes bulging as a thin line of frost crept up her fingers. Not enough to harm them, but enough to coat the 5 digits all the same. From this distance they almost looked like claws, as if something had siphoned the moisture out of the air, froze it, and bounded over her hand. Blake balked. Ruby cooed and crept closer to get a better look. Jan gave a low whistle. Nitenester was still sheathed. She hadn't used dust just now, or summoned one of her glyphs at that. Weiss must have realized it too, because she went absolutely berserk. What is this? Make it stop. That, Naruto hummed, would be a bloodline. He took his hand from her and thumbed his chin. And a familiar one at that. Think I'd see it again. Haku would be proud. Excuse you. Weiss tried to shout. Tried to refute him. All that emerged was a squeak through chattering teeth and a plume of steam as the temperature in the room continued to plummet. Who ... is Haku? And how do I stop this? Blake hid a smile behind her hand. Well, she's certainly an ice queen now. Young cackled. Up top, kitty cat. Hey, I'll tell you about that guy sometime ... As to the how, just control your breathing. As they high-fived, Naruto snatched Weiss' hand up again and pressed a pressure point below her index finger. Chakra tends to flare when you get worked up, and yours is more volatile than most. Here, a flash of light pulsed across the room, accompanied by a faint feeling of static in the air, and heat reasserted itself once more. I've siphoned off the worst of it. Shouldn't build back up like that again for a while. Weiss rubbed her fingers, watching in quiet confusion as the ice crumbling away. Young scratched at her collarbone. Strange, she'd felt something just now, like a shiver passing through her. Ruby whistled innocently. Suo, sisters, big surprise. Who knew? Weiss rounded on her. You knew, didn't you? Her grin was all teeth. Man alive. Young palmed her face. It all made sense now. Her baby sister had been grinning for days now. Small wonder Weiss was so irritated with her. Still, that solved the mystery that had been plaguing them. Everything was good now. Familial ties aside, they could go back to Beacon with their hearts at ease. So why did she have the feeling this wasn't over? Come along, dear. Willow took Weiss by the hand and tugged her upstairs. Let's give your father some space while he wraps things up. I refuse to believe this. She let herself be dragged, all but spitting every step of the way. He is not my father. I'm fairly certain a DNA test will prove otherwise. Weiss whined, and they soon lost the rest of their words as she stomped up the steps. Young shook her head. You've got a messed up life, old man. His shoulders slumped. I wonder whose fault that is. Summer immediately pinched his cheek for it. Oh, he laughed. I wasn't talking about you. Oh, it sounded like you were. Their eyes met, and Young felt something shifted in her as the duo began to squabble anew. Her frown deepened. She'd met him before and there hadn't been any reaction then. But when he'd used his what had he called it just now? Chakra, she'd felt a twinge twist in her chest. Could he be? No, there was just no way. The chances were so astronomical. He hadn't even known about Ruby until recently. And yet if it was possible, if there was even a chance. No, miracles didn't happen. She wasn't that lucky. Her hands clenched into fists at her sides, nails biting into her palms. For a fleeting moment, her semblance slipped out of her grasp and her eyes flashed scarlet. Ruby noticed somehow, because she rounded on her. So did Naruto. His gaze snapped to her a heartbeat. In a flash, a literal flash of golden light, he appeared before her. Fast. He moved quick for an old guy. Young jolted back, but it was too late. A hand snared her wrist, not to disarm her, only to touch her wrist and keep her from retreating. Tan fingers ran down the length of it, seeking a vein in her arm. He tugged her closer and hunkered over, forehead touching hers. His eyes bored into hers, a fierce and startling red ... just like her own. It was like looking into a mirror. Do that again, he growled. Do what? Young met him glare for glare. I don't even know what I did. His right hand flitted out to join the left, cradling her wrist like fine china. Let me see. His eyes closed, and when they opened once more, they had returned to their true blue. Young almost wished they hadn't, because his eyes pulsed, lit within by tongues of azure flame. A tether of ethereal cerulean light shot forth from his fingers and lanced into her arm. Almost immediately she felt something stir in her chest. A force deep inside her responded to that pale tether of pale radiance, and her heart skipped a beat. Like an old key turning in a rusty lock, opening a door she hadn't even known was there. And she heard a voice. So that's where a piece of me went. With those words, Young's semblance ripped itself out of her grasp. Her eyes, already red, glowed. And her hair burst into flame. This time the fire didn't stop there. It threaded its way down her arms, around her legs, bathing her in a golden inferno ... and yet it didn't hurt. She balked at her pale sun-embraced palms and watched the embers dance over her fingertips. Glowing. She was glowing. Her entire body stood bathed in this ... What was it? A cloak or something? Why was she on fire? Home. The fire seemed to sing in Young's mind. Home, home, home. Summer blinked. Ruby's hands flew to her mouth. Naruto seemed to be of a like mind, because his eyes absolutely bulged. That's impossible. He let her go, and the fire guttered out. First Ruby, now you. How many kids did I miss? Lake quirked a brow. Is that a rhetorical question or? Not now, you. Naruto shook his head. Did I cuck a dead man? No, I couldn't have. Could I? He took his head between his hands and shook it from side to side. Wait, hold on a second. He whirled. I knew about Ruby and Weiss at least. And I have so many questions, said Schnee hollered behind a door upstairs. Later, princess. How the hell did this happen? Ruby raised a hand. What does cuck mean? No. Young instinctively clamped a hand over her sister's mouth. We are not doing this right, and oh, don't bite me. She withdrew with a grasp as Ruby growled. When had her little sister gotten this fierce? Unbelievable. Summer swore over them both. I know the two of you never. We didn't. He rounded on her before she could tweak his cheek, then paused. Although, Summer's face was thunderous. Why do you mean although? It's just ... you know. Naruto coughed into his fist and made a point of looking away. There was that time in Vacuo, remember? The vacation. The five of us. We all got really drunk and woke up in SHHH. Now it was Summer's turn to clamp a hand over his mouth. His face was redder than her namesake. We swore never to speak of that. What happens in Vacuo stays in Vacuo. I'm not talking about it. He flailed his arms at her. I barely remember any of it. Young's head was spinning. She couldn't make heads or tails of this. Any of it. She between them, baffled. Mom, Summer wouldn't meet her eyes. In the end, Naruto did. Well, this is all kinds of awkward. He took his hand from her arm and knelt down before her. Yes, I should explain some things before it has a chance to fester. I knew your mother, once. Before. He didn't miss her once. She was a coward and I kept trying to make her more than that. I taught her a few tricks. How to fight and hide. Like a shinobi. For a moment he seemed terribly old beyond his years and looked away with quiet shame. That was a mistake, obviously. But how? Summer made angry summer noises. In the end, it fell to Naruto to explain. Vacuo, a vacation for Team STRQ and me, then a luau of alcohol. Come to think of it, it was around that time Raven got PRGNNT. His gaze snapped to hers and something hit Yang. His eyes were blue. Raven's were red. Scarlet plus sapphire made violet. Or in her case, lilac. He patted her head. I always assumed you were ties. Apparently the sage said otherwise. Her world began to crumble. You mean you two didn't even love each other? His face twisted in a wince. No, I'm sorry. By the end we hated each other. If ever see her again, I'm breaking her legs. Question. Ruby, bless her, saved her by raising a hand. The heck's a sage? Someone who's laughing their butt off right now. Naruto's dad's smile grew decidedly strained. And someone I intend to throttle when I finally reach the afterlife. So, his arm snapped up and he craned a weather eye at the ceiling. Any more questions? If so, now's the time to ask. Blake, who had scarcely spoke a word the entire time, finally raised her hand. Yang saw it and shook her head. Stubborn kitty didn't listen. You still haven't told me how you know my mother's name. Yang flung up her arms. Blake, seriously. Summer's fist demolished a shelf. Right. Naruto's shoulders sagged. Hand. Now. Blake drew back. I don't think that's a good idea. Her words peaked into a shriek as Ruby planted both hands between her shoulders and gave her a good strong shove. Bereft of balance, Blake stumbled forward with a squeak. Naruto caught by the left wrist and placed 2 fingers to the vein there. That eerie tether of blue light chakra flashed out again and the normally stoic girl jerked back with a hiss. Yang didn't miss the way the shadows played over her Blake's hand, almost as if they were alive. That definitely wasn't her semblance. She used clones ... and so ... did Naruto. Oh gods, Blake must have realized too, because her eyes narrowed to golden slits. What did you just do? He ripped the ribbon from her head. I knew it. You're a faunus. Hey. It was a testament to Naruto's shock that she was able to break his grip at all. He stumbled back, face gone ashen. Ruby did a little dance of joy. Her too. Naruto retreated half a step, face gone ashen. This is not my day. Your mother was supposed to marry Gira. They were fine when I left. Blake blinked balefully. The only Gira I know married Sienna-kan. They lead the White Fang. She clamped both hands over her mouth, too late. Naruto's gaze locked onto her. Somehow, he read her like a book with little more than a glance. Everyone heard a molar crack in the back of his jaw. Is that so? Naruto's smile was decidedly strained. I see. So my daughter's an ex-terrorist. He nodded a little too vigorously, so much so that Yang found herself shrinking back from the intensity of his gaze. Seems I might have to pay Menagerie a visit. A naughty cat's been lying to me. Summer bustled around him and took Blake by the chin. Don't mind him. He's just a bit broken right now. Let me have a look at you. Yang craned her neck around the duo just in time to hear Naruto laugh into his hand. It wasn't a terribly loud sound, more the chuckle of someone who knew he was screwed. He palmed his face and shook his head. His eyes really did go red when he was angry. Another similarity they shared among themselves. Ruby slammed into her. Young. ... Not now, Rubes. Yes, now. Her sister rounded on her and grabbed her hands. Do you know what this means? Her lips pursed. That dad was in butt and slept around. Oi. Naruto recoiled. I did not. It's complicated. Summer scowled at the floor. More than you know. There's a story to be told there. Later. Ruby latched onto her shoulders and gave her a shake. Young, listen. Don't you get it? Another shake followed the first, strong to do when you were short, but she made a fair attempt. Her silver eyes practically shone. This means we're really real sisters now. Young's mind ground to a halt. Half-sisters technically, but the point stood. That ... was rather enticing. A small part of her had always chafed at it, the ugly knowledge that for all Summer's efforts, they weren't truly family. Not by BLD. The idea that they could be, that it was possible ... Well, she liked that. Liked it an awful lot, really, but still. This was a bit much to take in. Naruto must have noticed, because his shoulders slumped. Look, I get it. This is a lot to take in ... Don't have to call me dad or anything. He temporized with a raised hand. I've missed nearly 18 years of your life. I understand if you want nothing to do with me. That hand rose to scratch at the back of his head as he looked away. Rubies and Weiss are one thing, but I don't have any right to call you my daughter. His gaze flitted over to Blake. You too, Missy. I didn't know about either of you. Maybe that's my fault. All eyes snapped to Summer. I drove you away. She stepped up beside him, wouldn't even let you come by. It's my burden to bear, too. And it's mine for not realizing sooner. Naruto snapped back. I mean really, if I'd just bothered to actually check. And if I hadn't pushed you away the first time, none of this would have happened. Summer, stop blaming yourself. It was that same determination that finally set Young off once and for all. He was so willing to accept her when Raven had practically tossed her in the trash days after giving BRTH. And yet this complete stranger was willing to accept her wholeheartedly based on a maybe. It was too much. Her eyes began to sting. She sank her teeth into her lower lip to stifle a sob. It didn't work. Naruto saw it and reached out for her. "Young, where were you?" She punched him, strong as she could. Naruto didn't even try to dodge. His head snapped back, riding the blow with the practiced ease of a brawler. His feet didn't move. There wasn't even any BLD. It felt like punching a brick wall. All this time, Young hit him again. He didn't say a word. He just took it. Let her vent. Why? Her eyes blurred with tears and her third punch went wide. She slapped at his chest instead, each blow growing weaker than the last. All right. He tilted his head, wiping a small scuff mark from the corner of his mouth. I deserve that. He looked so sad. It made her want to weep. She wasn't sure why, from joy or fear, but tears stung her all the same. Because he was here. He was right here, looking just as baffled and terrified as she was. There wasn't a hint of anger or regret in his eyes. Guilt, hell of a lot of that maybe, but not anger and certainly not disappointment. What did that mean? Look, Naruto smacked his lips, I'll be the first to admit. Raven and I didn't see eye to eye on much of anything, really. But I swear, he knelt down before her, reached out, and took her hands in his. If I'd suspected for even a sliver of a second that you were mine, I would have been there every day. His hand squeezed hers. Every day. If you'll let me, I'll do my best to make up for all of them. Each word hit Young like a punch to the gut. She physically shook where she stood. Just like that. He nodded once. Just like that. You too, Blake. EFLCK glanced toward the sullen Faunus, who had been edging toward the door when no one was looking. Just stay right there, young lady. Summer body blocked her when she tried to bolt. You and I are going to have a long talk once I'm done here. I just don't get you. Young stomped a foot, shattering a portion of the tiled floor underfoot. You don't even know me, yet you're ready to just throw your life away for my sake. Yup. Naruto looked back to her without an iota of hesitation. Because that's what family does. We're there for another, through the good and the bad. Young SCK in a breath so sharp it actually hurt her throat. Don't say that. You don't get to say that. In the background, Ruby finally lost her patience. Come on, Young, say yes. She sniffed once instead. Shitty old man. Naruto quirked a brow. Language. It was the last straw. Young hiccuped. It wasn't his words, not his promises, or even the way he said them. Just that little bit of parental displeasure that sent her thoughts hurtling over the edge. It was such a dad thing to say, something she'd secretly longed to hear, yet hadn't. Never in her life had she needed something so much and never known until she received it. Summer gave her back a tiny nudge. Go on. He won't bite. Young tried to hold her tears in. She really did. Damn it, she was a big girl. She wasn't going to break down like. She warbled once and broke. Strong arms closed around her. This time she didn't push them away. And now the consequences of my actions come back to bite me. Naruto sighed. Anybody else want a hug? Ruby needed no further prodding than that. She squirmed her way into the side of their embrace. Yes, please. Young felt Summer's arms enfold them from behind and that was it. Any chance she had of controlling herself went up in smoke. The waterworks wouldn't stop. Naruto's gaze met Blake's over her shoulder. You want in on this, too? The faunus shook her head rapidly and tried to back away too late. She just wasn't quick enough. A golden arm burst forth from Naruto's back, caught her, and reeled her in like the fish she so favored. Get over here. Are we all related? How? Weiss was in a proper rage once they got back to Beacon. Ruby didn't care. No, wait, maybe she did, but she was too excited to let it bother her. She giggled like a look and toppled back onto her bunk bed, legs kicking gleefully. She couldn't help but smile as her head hit the pillow. Big families were best families. There was no way this week could get any better. It just couldn't get any better. How little she knew. Naruto turned a baleful look toward the vaunted veiling of his shop. They're gone, now. He spoke to the shadows. Come on out. Even stop hiding. A merry cackle echoed from the rafters above. Must I? But it's so comfortable up here. The blonde pinched the bridge of his noise. How long have you been up there? The silence was telling. Tyrion. Well. That jolly voice sang from the rafters. Look who the fox dragged in. Kurama yawned. This fox is about to squish a scorpion if he doesn't tell me why he's here. What do you want, Tyrion? How cruel. A grinning faunus vaulted down from the second floor and landed behind him. Can I not check in on an old friend or two? Naruto pursed his lips. I don't recall us being friends. Associates, fellow killers, slayers of monsters and men, sure. But friends, don't be so cold. An arm looped around his shoulder, drawing him close. We used to wreak such havoc together, you and I. Don't you remember? He swung an arm up toward the ceiling with a grandiose laugh. And now look at you, living the dream. Kurama snorted. Those were the days. Naruto shook himself free and walked away. Those days are done. Are they? Tyrion called at his back. I hear a certain candlewick has you rather hot under the collar. Naruto paused. Torchwick. He corrected, then realized he'd jumped on it. What do you know? His smile was sinister. Now, my knowledge comes with a price. Figured. He was making a deal with the devil. He just knew it. And yet, name it. These children of yours. His old partner rubbed his hands together. I'd like to meet them properly. I've never been an uncle. Naruto pinched his nose, feeling a migraine coming on. Tyrion, no. Out of the question. Tyrion, yes. If they're anything like you, we'll get along swimmingly. They're not killers. Not like us. Not yet. He tittered. Nothing a little push can't solve. Oh. Not the tail. All right. I'll talk. Kali's scroll was ringing. Even half asleep, she recognized it at once, a jaunty jingle she'd chosen long ago in happier times and hadn't been able to bring herself to change since. And right now, it was loud. Terribly, horribly loud. No. She clutched her pillow over her head with a low whine and rolled over, determined to ignore it. It's early. Let me sleep. It kept ringing on and on for a good 30 seconds. A full minute, now. Still she refused to rise. Her bed was warm, the blankets soft, and she'd been having such a lovely dream. Happier times, simpler times, days when he had been in her life, fleeting moments of laughter and teasing, hopes for a future that had since become so much ash. Finally, the ringing ceased. Heh. She purred into her pillow. Mama wins. Content with her victory, she snuggled down and drifted back into dreamland. A worry gnawed angrily at the back of her mind, but in her sleepy stupor she couldn't quite place it. Who was that anyway? It wasn't like someone to call in the early hours of the morning unless there was an emergency. Menagerie wasn't on fire, so it couldn't be that. She would have smelled smoke by now. Meh, probably nothing. Her scroll began to ring again. Kali's brow furrowed as she struggled to keep her eyes shut. A tiny ember of remembrance sparked to life in her sleep-addled mind. She knew that ringtone. Only one soul on Remnant had it. She'd given it to an old friend, near and dear to her heart. Unbidden, she recalled just who it belonged to. Wait. Golden orbs sprang open in the low light, even as feline ears drooped atop her head. With a long-suffering sigh, the Belladonna matriarch rolled over and forsook her warmth for the waking world. An arm stabbed out of her cover cocoon, flailing in vain for her nightstand. She missed her fist attempt, stubbed a thumb on the second, finally succeeded at the third, narrowly catching before it could plunge off the dresser and shatter upon the wooden floor. Snatching it up, she yanked it under the blanket only to realize it had gone still and silent in her hands. Trembling fingers flailed for her voicemail. Hello, Kali. Hello, drawling snarl crooned in her ear. Its deep timbre made her tremble, and not necessarily in a bad way. I've found your daughter. Or should I say our daughter. Wait, our. He knew. Or he'd figured it out, the clever devil. Naughty little kittens run away to Vale ... and Beacon. Did you know she was a terrorist? I didn't. Yup, he definitely knew. Be a dear and visit her, won't you? That was it. A single message among 30 missed calls. She released a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. Just like that, she knew where Blake was. After all these years. Not a singe call or text from her one and only child, not knowing if she was dead or alive. The sudden knowledge that she was ... it relieved her more than words could possibly convey. It also implied that Naruto was in Vale. How else could he have discovered her little kitten? Well, the cat, as they say, was out of the bag. Was it too early to catch a boat to Mistral? She could always charter a flight to Vale from there. She had a daughter to DSBLN. Sparks and explosions had been quiet for the last 3 days. Honestly, Naruto found it more than a little dull. As both a purveyor and purchaser of dust, he lived for explosions, the chaos of life itself. Controlled chaos, of course. Life was an explosion after all. He didn't fancy the idea of someone coming around to bust up his shop again, not after he'd finally fixed the sign. But he wouldn't say no to a little amusement. With Summer away on a mission and Willow off negotiating a dust deal, he almost found himself ... dare he say, lonely. Him, of all people. Madness. Who would have thought? Kurama yawned, sprawling atop the counter. We've gotten used to the company. The shop door swung open with a merry chime. Naruto looked up and quirked a brow when he found Cinder stood there, hands planted on her hips. She didn't look much pleased with him. Still, she hesitated, unwilling to cross the threshold. He knew the reason. Even now she half expected a trap. Not from him, of course, but others. Reminded him of when she was a small gangly thing, shrinking away from her own shadow. They grow up so fast. Summer's out on a mission. She won't be back until this evening. Willow's busy, too. When her scowl redoubled, he sighed. Something wrong. She didn't answer. I don't see Emerald or Mercury with you. The words reactivated Cinder. No. His adopted daughter stalked forward, leaned across the counter, and stabbed a finger against his nose. No. Naruto nearly went cross-eyed trying to keep track of the questing digit. No. That manicured nail drilled in, seeking brain matter. No. I'm afraid I don't follow. No. It was too good an opportunity to pass up. Cinder, sweetie, I know words are strong, but I'm gonna need more than no from you here. He stepped his fingers and leaned forward. Use big words. Her face flushed a petty pink. Tyrion, uncle. Golden eyes blazed mere inches from his. No. Oh, yeah, there's not much I can do about that. Oh. He grinned as she tugged at his face. Please let go of my cheeks. I need those. No. Cinder flung up her arms. You must be joking. That fool is not my uncle. I refuse to accept it. He technically is. Still smiling, he leaned back before she could grab him again. We made a bit of a bargain. How did you even find him? He's been stalking around Vale for the last 3 days, making odd purchases. Her lips pursed into a thin line. I had Mercury and Emerald trailing him. When he saw me he called me his niece. She recoiled, looking vaguely ill. Explain this. No. Yup. Tyrion would do that in a heartbeat. He lived life by the seat of his breath, and to hell with the rest. Are the two of you related? Nope. He smacked his lips audibly. Cinder made angry cinder noises. Then that lunatic isn't my uncle. Naruto thumbed his chin. Well, we did swear a BLD oath and exchange drinks back in our heyday ago. Her face went ashen. No. Sorry. He shrugged. Tyrion's here to stay. I hate you, she huffed, folding her arms and huffing like the girl she no longer was. I really do. Naruto spread his arms wide. Does daddy's little girl need a hug? And no. He gave her one anyway. She thrashed like an angry panther in his arms, hissing and spitting, limbs flailing. Adorable. She'd always been feisty, even as a child. Her shin cracked off his aura strong enough to make it flare a bright cobalt blue, but still he didn't release her. Soon enough she tired, just as she always did. Bloody fool, she snarled, slumping into his shoulder. Why do you do this to me? Hey, he swatted her head. I didn't raise you with a tongue like that. She mumbled angrily into his shoulder. Now, use your words. Oh, did you just bite me? He reared back. Where is he, anyway? Tyrion, I mean. I thought he was with you. Realization broke like the dawn. Well, he said something about going to school. Cinder's glare was fire incarnate. He went after those girls, didn't he? Nah, it was bound to happen sooner or later. Better them than me. Someone was poking Weiss' knee. Said someone was going to be a dead someone if they didn't stop in the next 10 seconds. Ruby, no. She flailed an arm at them, bundling deeper into her blankets. Not this time. I don't care what you're up to, it's a weekend. I need my beauty sleep. The poking paused and she sighed her thanks. Who would have thought? Apparently her partner could be sensible after all. Abruptly it intensified tenfold. Stop this instant or I'll revoke your cookie privileges. Her tormentor did not cease, not even for the merest of moments. Her bleary mind supplied. Not Ruby, then. That threat usually worked wonders. Blake wasn't prone to such pointless pranks. Which meant, well, alright then. Young would have to die. Nothing personal. Actually, scratch that. It was very personal. Ruby would understand. She needed her sleep. How else was she supposed to grow up big and strong like Winter? By drinking milk. Not bloody likely. The poking was actually starting to hurt a little, now. An angry blue eye creaked open. What do you want? A man's face stared back, eyes glowing gold in the dark. Good morning, niece of mine. Not young at all. Weiss screamed. Osmond looked up from his coffee. Had he heard a shriek just now? Nonsense. Probably the wind. Weiss kept screaming. That scream woke Ruby, who took one look at the slender stranger looming over her partner and shrieked to high heaven. Naturally that woke Young, who promptly fell out her bunk in a mad tangle of arms and legs. Blake never stood a chance. She was only just sitting up when the blonde collided headlong with her. Both crashed to the floor, wrapped up in their own sheets. Lights snapped on in the chaos. What should have helped only made things worse. Much worse. Arg, it burns. Why me? Turn out the lights. Squinting against the sudden illumination, Weiss found herself face to face with one Tyrion Kalos. She also noticed the heavy burlap sack in his right hand. He's here to kidnap us, dear nieces. The stranger bowed, low and deep at the waist like some gentleman caller. I would never. In fact, his tail a fell seahead, curling around the sack, which she now noticed, wasn't empty at all. I come bearing gifts. Team RWBY screamed again. Well, most of them. Wait, nieces. Ruby paused and looked up, legs still crossed beneath her, mood cooling. Gifts, as in you're our uncle. Another uncle. Neat. Ruby, no. An uncle. Weiss nearly went incandescent with rage. Him. To us. Not a chance. We don't look a thing alike. Hey, I can believe it if he's involved. Young wriggled out of bed with a yawn. More uncles the merrier, right? Blake moaned incoherently, still stunned on the floor. Weiss twitched. Madness. Absolute madness. She would have words with mother about this. Oh, dear. Tyrion touched a finger to his lips. Am I not your favorite uncle? Pretty sure Uncle Kuro's got that on lock. The faunus reached into his sack. I brought high-caliber explosive rounds for your weapon. Ruby Proctor ripped them out his hands. And just like that I have a new favorite. Achoo. Somewhere miles away in a distant settlement, Kuro Branwen sneezed. I sense a disturbance in the force. He gripped Harbinger's hilt behind his back and glared into the wilderness. There can only be one. John felt inadequate. There it was, the ugly truth he would never admit to anyone else. A hunter. Him. John Ark was a fake, a fraud, and a bad one naturally. The boy who cheated his way into Beacon, the runt of the litter. Weakest in the class, scarcely able to hold his own even against jerks like Cardin. Cardin, for crying out loud. Kira wanted to train him, wanted to make him better, but she didn't understand. This was something he had to himself. If he didn't at least try, he'd never be able to look himself in the eye. And so he'd hit upon an idea. An upgrade was in order. Dusk could do wonderful things, and Ruby had been singing the praises of this place for days now. Crocia Moore's was a fine blade, make no mistake. Indeed, John wouldn't trade her for the world. The ancestral sword and shield of the Ark family had served him well thus far. He wouldn't have survived initiation without her. but it just wasn't enough. As much as it galled him to admit it, didn't have the martial skills needed to hold his own. He needed something to level the playing field. And so he'd come here. Weary blue eyes glanced up at the gold and crimson lacquer of the sign. It looked new, now repaired after the recent fiasco. Sparks and explosions. It read, "For all your dust needs." He'd never used dust in his fighting style before. Surely it couldn't be that strong, could it? Weiss and Blake used it all the time. Hell, nearly everyone in Beacon did. He didn't need much, just enough to gain an edge, to try and carve out a niche for himself in this wild school. Nothing ventured, nothing gained. Do or die. John grit his teeth, planted his feet, steeled his heart, and flung the door open with all his might. Imagine his surprise when the door swung the other way and smacked him in the face. Great, his ego wailed, no smarting. Way to make an impression. My apologies. The dulcet contralto of a young woman rose in his ears. I didn't see you there. John raised his gaze. A woman wearing a red dress stitched from pure sin awaited him in the lobby, one hand half extended for the handle. Golden eyes met his, framed by a curtain of ebony hair. As he looked on, she pulled a bit of it aside, revealing a small, bemused smile. When she did, his throat went completely dry, drier than the deserts of Vacuo. No, he muttered, it's my fault. I didn't see you, Miss Fall, she purred, taking his offered hand. Cinder Fall. Was it hot in here, or was it just him? Well, the name's John Ark, he faltered, a little running his free hand through his hair. Short, sweet, rolls off the tongue, ladies love it. Stupid, why tell her that? I'm a student at Beacon. Beacon, Her eyes burned. I'll be attending there myself in a few months. His brain rebooted. Hey, for the festival, of course. Right, not suspicious at all. He'd never have a chance with someone like her. No point in trying. A door in the back swung open with a hearty clang distracting him. Door opened again. Cinder, stop tormenting the boy and let him in. A rough voice crowed near the counter. I've got work to do. My apologies. She released his hand with a wink and sashayed away. It's been a pleasure, John. John nearly did a double take, barely noticing at all when she slid aside. His attention was already elsewhere. Was he looking at a ghost? It felt like it. At a glance, this man resembled his father. Almost frightfully so. A bit taller than Nicholas Ark perhaps, broader in the chest and with no beard to speak of, but the resemblance was there. Downright uncanny. If it weren't for the hair and those strange whiskers, they might have been brothers. Naruto Uzumaki, the man, introduced himself, plonking down behind the counter. That's my daughter, Cinder Fall. He introduced the woman with a wave. Don't mind her. She likes to tease. Charmed. The woman batted her lashes at him. John's brain failed again. Pretty girl, nope. Don't flirt with the shopkeep's daughter. That way lay ruin. So, the whiskered man clapped his hands. What brings you to my humble abode? John told him what he wanted in no uncertain terms. Looking to upgrade your weapon with dust, eh? The older blonde leaned back, thumbing his chin. Doable, that. I'm no weaponsmith, but I can suggest a few modifications. Those keen blue eyes strayed to his sheathed weapon. I'm guessing that's your sword. May I see her? He held out both hands expectantly. Beneath such a stern gaze, John couldn't help but do as he'd been bade. Unbuckling his sword, he handed it off to him. As he did so, he couldn't help but notice the calluses on those scarred palms. Not mere shopkeep, this. This man was a warrior, or had been. When those hands curled around the hilt of his sword, he felt a strange tightening in his chest. Blue eyes met his. She got a name. Crocia Morse, he replied. Sounds familiar. Sword and shield combo. Naruto muttered softly to himself, turning Crocia Morse end over end as one might a fine jewel. Yup, thought so. Been around a while, too. Step back a bit, please. There's something I want to test. Even as John did so, Naruto ripped Morse from her sheath and performed a quick slash, the like of which blasted his hair back. A crescent wave of light erupted from the weapon's tip and eviscerated the floor. From there he deployed the shield, tested its weight, then flung it outward at a wall as one might a demented frisbee. It struck the surface of an empty shelf with a hollow clang, rebounded off a pillar, then boomeranged back into his waiting hand. His fellow blonde caught it with a pleased grunt, did a little spin, and slammed it down. John's ego wilted. It just wasn't fair. How could a total stranger wield his own weapon better than him? Nothing quite like the classics. I can work with this. His appraisal complete, Naruto collapsed the shield and slid Crocia Morse gently into her sheath with reverent care. Only then did he return it to him. How attached are you to your sword? John squared his shoulders, fighting down a surge of sudden anxiety as he reclaimed what was his. I wouldn't be here without it. Thought so. Keen eyes drilled into his over his still deployed shield. Do you have any idea how old this weapon is? No, sir. It was an honest answer. She's been in the family for generations. Dad had her, and his father before him, then great-granddad before that. Of course they did. The blonde was staring at him openly now, a hint of nostalgia gleaming in his gaze. I made this blade 300 years ago for a friend. So this is where she ended up. What was that noise? It sounded like his world shattering. John croaked. You ... made Crocia Morse. How old was this guy? She's a prototype, only one of her kind. Tried smithing once. The blonde before him shrugged half-heartedly. Had the bright idea of making souls, living weapons, using the aura of the weapon's owner mingled within. my own chakra, then putting them in weapons. He planted his shin on one palm, his faint smile plucked at his whiskered cheeks. It would have been grand, weapons that changed and evolved with their wielder. Sadly, the fox on the counter yawned, startling him terribly. We couldn't do it without another human partner. Maybe in another life, another story. John recoiled. Did that fox just talk? The little vulpine didn't look at all contrite. And if I did, had some of the dust gotten into his eyes? Was he high? Foxes don't talk. Sure, they don't. It grinned at him. And the Grimm don't have a queen in dire need of snoo-snoo. Naruto swore under his breath, batted the little creature on its head, earning a growl. You're never going to let that go, are you? Nope. Naruto quirked a brow at John. Price range. Are we just going to ignore the talking fox? That isn't normal. Naruto continued to smile at him. Price range. I'm serious. What is he? Who are you? Price range. The sudden vehemence in his tone took John aback, but he rallied. I've got a bit of lien saved up. There's a good lad. We can discuss that later. Naruto leaned forward. Now tell me why you want to modify the blade I worked so strong on. Oh dear. He blundered. Because I'm not strong enough. Oh, oddly enough, that made the man smile. Are you frustrated to the fact that you are the weakest one? Good. John sputtered. Good. Hold on to that feeling. Naruto jabbed him in the chest. That's proof that you haven't given up yet on yourself. Listen, don't give up saying that you're living within your boundaries. Don't be a boring person like that. If you have the guts to not give up, you can become anything you want to be. We're living creatures that don't have wings, sure, but I've seen humans do some incredible things. John tilted his head. So what you're saying is so dense. If I didn't know better, I'd think you were one of mine. He frowned and leaned forward suddenly, snatching his hand. A thin tether of blue light shot down and lanced into his palm. John flinched as it rebounded off his aura. Nothing happened. Not a thing. There was no reaction whatsoever. Why did that worry him? He heard the man mutter. Not related, then. I don't know whether I should be proud or disappointed. You all right? Yup. Just checking. A hand clasped his shoulder. Let me tell you a secret, John. In order for a mediocre man to defeat a genius, he must become a demon through sheer strong work. That's what I did. My son, too. A blink. You have a son, too. Yup. Naruto hummed, touching a finger to his chin. Kyojiro's a fine fighter. Around is he. Think he goes by Rengoku these days. He worked himself to the bone to become the man he is now. Here, I'll scribble down his scroll number. He fetched a pen and a notepad from the desk. Might be able to teach you a ting or two. I think the two of you would get along swimmingly. Or you could let me train him. John's head whipped around with an audible crack. Pretty girl, say what? Cinder smiled sinfully back at him, temptation incarnate. Are you free this weekend? Interested in him, are you? Perhaps. Cinder shrugged as she watched a dazed John depart. We'll see if the seed sprouts. There she went with her words and half-truths again. Baffling girl. Pardon, I'm merely interested in his growth. He could understand. She'd grown used to drawing the eye of others, basking in their attention, knowing she was beyond them. To simply be brushed aside like that ... Well, he was sure it must have surprised her. Cinder disliked being ignored, but she loathed watching others wallow in their weakness even more. Probably brought back unpleasant memories for her. I've never had an interest in that sort of thing. Until now, it went unsaid. Still, he has potential. The door crashed open with a harsh crack before he could finish. Blake stormed in, eyes alight, pale face drawn in a rictus of anger. Me? Naruto tilted his head, somewhat baffled by her anger. What did I do? You know what you did. Her forehead slammed against his. You sixed that madman on us. Oh, right. How has Tyrion been these last 3 days? Absolutely infuriating. Cinder settled in to watch the fireworks that followed with a pleased smirk. She'd likely enjoy seeing him squirm for once. Traitors, the lot of them. Was this how she repaid his kindness? Really, now. Naruto laid his chin against one fist, smiling softly as she finished her rant. Tyrion means well. Surely he wasn't that bad. He absolutely was. Blake hissed like the scalded cat she wasn't. Don't get me started on the gifts. Called him off. Wait. He held up a hand, forestalling her. What exactly did he give you girls anyway? Explosive rounds for Ruby, she rattled off one finger after the other, armor upgrades for Young's gauntlets, and a book on glyphs for Weiss. Really, they were considerate gifts ... if one ignored the fact that he'd given still more in the last 3 days. Each gift had grown more outlandish than the last. Was he trying to turn them into killing machines? And you? She looked away, ears twitching. Tuna ... and books. What kind of books? Blake bit her lip. Oh, those kind. His laughter was gentle, like so much falling snow. But you like those, don't you? Then why do you want to call him off? Just do it. She flushed to the very roots of her hair. He's embarrassing me, I mean us. All of us. ... One does not simply command Tyrion Kalos, you know. Ugh. Blake wanted to throttle Naruto. She longed to lunge across the counter, grab the man who may or may not be her father by the throat, and give him a good strong squeeze for good measure. Surely that wasn't murderous of her. Nope. Definitely not. Surely Ruby and Jan would forgive her for it. Weiss might even thank her for such a kind deed. She went for Gamble Shroud instead. I will shoot you. Right in the head. He smiled, little more than a twitch of the lips. I'd survive it, sad to say. You probably would. She glared golden daggers at him. But it would hurt, wouldn't it? Like hell. Naruto granted her a nod. Here, a fresh bandolier of dust rounds slid across the counter. For your troubles. It's on the house. Her eyes widened. That was high-quality dust, no. Focus, Blake. Hold on to your anger. But dust. She could make so many elemental clones with that. In the end, Everest won out. She snatched it up and slung it over her shoulder. Not even a thank you. Naruto shook his head with a soft tut. Such a rude daughter I have. I am not your daughter. Keep telling yourself that. There it was, that smug smile again. Your chakra confirmed it, or would you rather I get a DNA test? Her will wilted. Why are you like this? Do you enjoy making me suffer? Not at all. His smile thinned, and she glimpsed a core of steel in him at last. If anything, I want you to thrive. I used to tease your mother in the same way. She'd give as good as she got. Before, well, he coughed and clamped down on whatever he'd been about to say. Which brings me to the next item on the agenda. Every muscle in her body tensed. Here it comes. ... Why were you with the White Fang? Blake bit her lip. You dug into my past. It wasn't a question. Bits and pieces. I have connections. Naruto didn't deny it. I wanted to see the measure of you. And ... what I found was lacking. The White Fang. Really? They need to be stopped. Naruto prattled on bullishly, igniting a tiny ember of hope in her heart, which begs the question, what kind of nonsense is Sienna feeding that Gira that's kept him from doing it? And why did you stick with them? The note of scorn that followed drowned said hope in the cold waters of reality. I'm sure there's a story there. Indignation burned in her heart, hot and heavy. We wanted to change the world. You changed it all right. He bit back, startling her terribly. And not for the better. Most of Remnant fears the faunus now, and the rest would rather see them quarantined in menagerie. Mindless violence, lashing out at all and anyone you think might have wronged you, is never the answer. He shook his head, further condemning her. Not in the long term. She knew that. Gods, she hated it, but his words stung the darkest part of her. That's why I left. And you're one to talk. Ruby told me what you did. What I practice is targeted aggression. Naruto's calm remained impenetrable, even in the face of her fury. There's a difference. I punish those responsible for wrongdoings. No more, no less. I do not target civilians and innocents just because I think they might have wronged me. Leaning forward, he breathed his elbows on the counter and pushed his forehead against hers. I'd say Kali raised you wrong, but we both know you ran away, so she's not even to blame for that, is she? How dare he? How dare? You always run away when things get tough, don't you? Still he pressed her, not with anger, but sadness. When are you going to stand and fight for what you believe in, Blake? She cringed. Stop. He did not. You can't run forever. Her fists at her sides. I said stop it. Sooner or later, you'll run out of places to run, and then. I told you to stop. Rage ripped sense away. Her hand cracked out, clenched knuckles striking him across the face. Naruto didn't budge, even as his face creased little from the sudden strike. Blake recoiled. It was like striking a concrete wall without aura, punching an Ursa dead in the face. Try as she might to hold it in, Blake couldn't keep herself from crying out. All right, maybe I went too far, there. He plucked her hand before she could retreat. Here, let me heal the fracture before you break it. She tried to tug away, but she couldn't. His grip was ironclad. It made her seethe all the more. Why you? Now, a new voice crooned from upstairs. We're all family here. No need for violence. Blake pivoted furiously to find a young woman gilding down the main stairwell. She took in long, dark, and stark golden eyes, pale skin concealing a figure even a huntress would die for. Hell, she could have been her sister if it weren't for her distinct lack of faunus features. What black hell was this? Cinder, meet Blake. Naruto waved a hand. Also my daughter. Adopted, thankfully. The older woman sniffed once, considering her. You're one of his then. Blake huffed and looked away. No, she's still in the denial phase. Naruto waved a hand. Speaking of denial, your mother should be here in a few days. His voice peaked a little in warning ... or was it disappointment? She couldn't be sure. Maybe less. You might want to make peace with yourself now. Blake felt her ears droop. Never had she wished more for her beau. You called her. Of course I did. She's your mother. She deserved to know where you'd been. Dismay burst out of her, taking 2 words. Daddy, no. Daddy, yes. She's probably worried sick. The bell above the door chimed. Am I interrupting? Blake froze. She knew that voice. It was the same voice that had cooed to her as a child when she bandaged a SCD knee, or fallen down, or hurt herself during training. A warm tone, gentle encouragement that she'd always held close to herself, even in her dreams. Now, it filled her with dread. No, not possible. It just couldn't be. There was no way Mom could have made it here so swiftly, not in 3 days. She'd have to charter a ship all the way from Menagerie to Mistral, then catch a flight there to Vale. Even then she'd probably go straight to the school campus first in search of her. So why was she here? The bell chimed again as the door closed behind her, heralding her doom. Ask not for whom the bell tolls, it tolls for thee. Blake wanted to die. She wanted to shrink away into a shadow and never be found. Cinder patted her shoulder, told her to give them a chance, nodded once to Kali, who balked back at her in turn, then eased her way out the door. It locked behind her, trapping the 3 of them within. Naruto leaned past Blake, cutting off her escape route. You always did have a talent for showing up when I least expected it. He quipped with a small smile. If I didn't know better, I'd say it was a semblance. Full lips quirked down in a frown. Was that a jab at me? Against her better judgment, Blake turned to face the music. Sure enough, Kali Belladonna Mom gazed back at her, eyes wide, ears perked up, flitting between disbelief and raw, motherly joy. Then she noticed Naruto again, and every bit of that glee drained away, replaced by trepidation. She did not fidget, but she looked anxious all the same. I'm awful at this, Kali. Naruto not dad, never dad. Gave a sigh and recovered. You're a day early. Oh, you know me. Her laughter was brittle, even to her ears. I like to take my time. She could see the look in her mother's eye, a faint note of longing left unresolved. Naruto must have seen it too, because he made no move to approach, let alone evade her. Instead, he rose from behind the counter and let her come to him. Mom did, but slowly, a woman walking to her execution. Mom had always been the bubbly one in the family, always so happy and chipper, ever eager to speak her mind. Yet in this moment she was positively subdued. Rather than leap forward, she paused a stone's throw away just out of arm's reach and dithered, unwilling to cross the line. Who was this woman and what she'd done with her mother? It didn't make a LCK of sense. It's been a while, Naruto. Kali. He granted her a nod. I see you got my message. Nice of you to come all this way. Yes, well. Golden eyes FLCK'd to Blake, drawing a wince from her. Thank you so much for that. It's nice to finally know that my daughter is safe and sound. Blake wilted anew, feeling every bit the little girl caught with her hand in the proverbial cookie jar. I'm sorry, our daughter. A low frisson of tension coursed through the room as Naruto spoke. Kali made a noise trapped somewhere between a sigh and a whine when he drove the point home. She has chakra. Blake flashed back to her hand, pulsing with shadows. He called it a bloodline. But that meant, she looked down half expecting her hands to be covered in darkness once more. They only shimmered a little. The block he put in still held fast, like an iron spike in her mind. A wild thought burrowed into her brain as she considered it. What if he removed it? What if she MSDR it? How strong would she be? Would I be strong enough to stop Adam? Mom hung her head, snapping her back to reality. So that's how you figured it out. I should have known. They paused, looking longingly into one another's eyes. Blake nearly gagged. What was this, one of her romance novels? But no, they weren't flinging themselves at one another, strange as it might sound, they were simply waiting. Mom did not fling herself at Dad like some silly hussy or a love-struck lass. She simply laid a hand on his shoulder as if she were afraid to touch him after all this time. I'm sorry. No need. Blake looked on aghast as the baffling blonde reached up and laid a hand on hers, fingers tracing her scarred knuckles. There's nothing to forgive. You probably had your reasons for keeping her secret. Her head whipped toward him, but he didn't falter. I have my share of enemies. I can see why you did it. Kali hiccuped, caught flat-footed. Just like that. Yup. His reply proved immediate. Did you really think I'd hold a grudge over something like this? No, but... Her words warbled as her expression wavered, and in a moment of blinding clarity, Blake understood. I kept her from you for 17 years. And now I've got 17 years of teasing to make up for. He didn't waver. All's well that ends well. This was real. Not a trick or some elaborate ruse meant to deceive her. Mom had never acted like this toward anyone else. Her throat closed, as if she'd been holding a breath this entire time and not realized it. This man, this oaf, this affable fool with a smile of steel. Could he really be? Mom rounded on her before she could sneak away. And as for you, young lady, don't move a muscle. Her legs locked up even as her ears flattened atop her head. CRP. She'd forgotten all about the other Goliath in the room. Sure, great, she had a dad now. But now her mother was here. Mom, who she'd not seen for years. Mom, who must have been worried sick. Mom, who she hadn't called or even communicated with all this time. Furtive eyes FLCK'd to Naruto, only to find him holding both palms before his chest. Well, drat. No escape, then. I had a good reason for running away. Kali's voice promised punishment. A good reason, she says. Did you at least break up with that Taurus boy? Naruto perked up. She had a boyfriend. Wait, Adam Taurus. Why were his eyes glowing? No. My little girl is not dating the maniac. Maniac. That was exactly what he'd become. What she had to stop. He's not my boyfriend anymore. Mistakes were made. Speaking reminded Naruto and Kyle that she was still here. Her parents descended upon her. Blake stiffened, ready to bolt with a clone at the slightest provocation. Something blocked her semblance. Naruto dad caught her left side, and Kali mom took her right. Sandwiched between them, there was nowhere to run. Warm arms enfolded her in a kind yet firm embrace and held tight. Unable to move, arms pinned to her sides, she fidgeted restlessly. Here it comes. Any moment now they'd give her the telling off of the century, say how angry they were with her, how disappointed. We were so worried about you. Her breath caught, strangling sense. What? She said she was worried. Naruto prodded. You gone deaf. Why weren't they angry? They had to be angry. If they weren't, what then? She'd run away to White Fang hoping to change things. But she'd only made it worse. So she'd fled from the Fang to Beacon. Once she'd found her father, she tried to run from that, too. Maybe Naruto was right. All she did was run. From her past, from her mistakes, even from her friends. She might talk a big game, but at the end of the day she was a coward. Willing to fight, but unable to stay when things got though. That she was considering running even now only showed her colors. And yet for all that, her parents still held her like the little girl she wasn't. Her eyes burned with fresh tears. I'm sorry. They didn't answer, just held her close, as if everything were okay. No, it wasn't. She could feel herself breaking. Something came loose in her chest. Blake bawled. You're all related. 3 little words from Nora. That was all it took to turn young red like roses. Credit where it was due, her body reacted quickly. She was a huntress in training after all, she could do nothing less. Her eyes snapped red, legs tensed and muscles fired in the same instant, all but launching her over the table then into her prey, driving the giggling grenadier out of her seat and down to the floor. Even as they landed, she clamped both hands over her mouth with a hiss. S-H-H-H-H. Too little, too late. Even as she restrained the rowdy redhead, her earlier outburst echoed through the cafeteria like a thunderclap. More than a few curious students looked their way. Some squinted, others connected the dots. Still more began to murmur among themselves, heedless of the blonde's baleful glare. Didn't take long for the whispers to start soon thereafter. She could already hear them from here. In a matter of hours the Beacon rumor mill would be buzzing. Not a rumor if it was the truth, now was it. Damn it, there went her rep. Nora made a muffled noise against her hand. MMRGL. Cheeky little. Yes, I'm mad at you. Yang took the grinning girl and shook her by the shoulders. Why'd you have to go and say that out loud? Now everybody knows. How is that possible? Leave it to Lai Ren to ask the tough questions. You and Ruby I could understand, but Blake and Weiss looked nothing alike. His gaze swept between them as they climbed back to the table, alighted upon Ruby, then turned back to her once more. Let alone the 4 of you ... and you say you all have the same father. Yang scratched the back of her head with a wince. It's, complicated. Clearly. Yup. And, she fell at a scathing glance Nora's way. It was supposed to be a secret until someone hollered at the top of her lungs. Nora slumped. Sorry. Well, the cat's out of the bag now. Had Blake been sitting with them, she would scoffed and said something huffy to that effect. Fortunately she wasn't. Neither was Weiss. Thank the gods for small mercies. Ruby giggled and kicked her legs beneath the table. Of course she'd find this funny. She was all for having more siblings. Never mind the fact that Blake and Weiss were absolute hellcats about it. Hell, they weren't even on speaking terms at the moment. Didn't they know BLD ran thicker than water? Someone should have told them that. Sadly it seemed they hadn't. Honestly, those two. I think that sounds grand. Kira hid a wan smile behind her right hand, heedless of the bloody red glare her grin earned. It's lonely being an only child. When I was younger, I always wanted siblings myself. You should consider yourselves fortunate. John had an odd, distant, almost glazed look in his eyes, as though someone had SCK'd the very soul out of him. Fortunate, she says ... Try having 7 sisters. John, Kira tugged at him. His head hit the table with a dull thunk in response, drawing a yelp from her. John, don't go into the light. Stay with me, John. Seemed to reactivate Ruby, judging by the concerned look on her face. He all right. He's been out of it all morning. Our glorious leader's been out late ... Well, lately. Nora shrugged. Won't tell us why. Kira continued to tug at the poor boy, to no avail. Yang felt a rare pang of sympathy for her fellow blonde. Was that a bruise on his cheek? Had he been training? Alone. She squinted at him for a moment, thought about calling him out on it, then thought bet. Lava Boy should keep his secrets while could. Kira would pry them out of him sooner or later. Bah, she fell seek a strand out her face. He's probably just being macho, maybe training at night or something. Whoa, now P-Money was sulking. Didn't take much to guess why. Enough about Johnny. Nora slapped a palm against the table. What I want to know is this, your old man give you a dust discount? I guess. Yang shrugged, not really paying attention. I mean it pretty high-end stuff, even for just a dust shop. Ruby could tell you more, works there on the weekends to make up for a window she BRO. She winced when Ruby kicked her under the table. A rueful glance went her way. Oops, sorry, sis. Yeah, dang. Kira perked up. Dust, you say? I have been running rather low on ammunition lately. Nora's eyes got really big. I foresee a visit to Vale in our future. Ren saved them, bless his simple soul. Speaking of which, where are Weiss and Blake, anyway? Yang winced again. Funny you should mention that. Ruby delivered a happy cheer-up. Parent counseling. Team JNPR blinked. John raised his head. ... What? Drink your tea, dear. Weiss scowled, but nevertheless complied. I don't like this. Not any of it, not at all, not one bloody bit of it. Bad enough that her worldview had been appended recently, but to be plucked out of classes by her own mother for an entire day. There could be no greater shame for her after all she'd been through. Worse still, she knew the reason why her grades had been slipping as of late. Naturally, Mother knew the reason for that, too. Whether you like it or not is immaterial. Mother remained unfazed even as she sipped from her own glass. The fact remains, it is the truth. Her right eye began to twitch. She wanted to shout, to snarl, shriek even, to grab the table and flip it in her mother's smiling face. Good for her, she was herself again, happy as a clam. Weiss wasn't. Happy, that is. She felt trapped, confused. Worse, they both knew she couldn't throw a fit here, no matter how much she might wish so. To suffer an outburst here, in public in a cafe like this ... Well, she'd make a fool of herself. At the end of the day she still had her pride. So she settled for clanking her teacup down a bit harder than she should have. Ice crept up her fingers, responding to her stress. Again, Weiss hissed at her bloodline. until it receded. Only then did she dare look Mother in the eye. Willow looked right back, the very picture of a Schnee once more, a woman seemingly returned from the dead. In truth, she'd simply dropped the facade, the act she'd been putting on all these years. Those once dull eyes were bright and lively, her face clean, hair styled back into an immaculate braid over her right shoulder. Even her choice of drink had changed in recent days. The pale cup she drank from was filled with some ghastly herbal tea, not the red wine she often favored. She only ever drank that when she was with him. That man cannot be my father. Weiss refused to speak his name, if only to deny him the satisfaction, wherever he was. He's an absolute lout. Is he? No. Willow crossed one leg over the other. I dare say he's a sore sight better than Jack. Anger loosened his tongue. That may well be, but it doesn't change the fact that you cheated. A sardonic smile was her reward. Yes, I thought you might take issue with that. Another sip of her glass, followed by a sigh. But I didn't, not really. Ours was ever a loveless marriage. Jack sought to use me, and so I decided to use him instead. That sly smirk took on a wicked edge. Turnabout is fair play, as they say. He only ever saw what he wanted to see. But all this time, I kept up the act for your sake. Willow returned quietly. Had he realized your true heritage, you would have been disowned on the spot and cast into the street as a baby. Now there's no need to perpetuate this face any longer. Another quiet sip followed the last. Your sister already knows the truth. She's known for quite some time. Her heart skipped a beat. Winter does. She does. Another languid sip. I've asked her to visit Vale when she has a chance for leave. An awful pit opened in her stomach. What about Whitley? The silence was telling. Mother, he will be told. Eventually. When she didn't immediately, the Schnee matriarch only sighed. He always took more after Jack than anyone else. Let him live out the lie a little longer. Weiss glared pale daggers at the woman she'd once called mother. You're awful. How can you be so cold? Perhaps I am, dear girl. But know this. Everything I did for you. A wordless snarl rose in her. You did it for yourself. Myself. Something sparked in Mother's gaze. It almost looked like anger. No, Weiss. In the beginning perhaps, yes. Her hand flitted across the table, snagging hers before she could think to stand. If your father and I were truly so selfish, we would have broken the news of your true heritage long ago. Instead, we wanted to give you a proper life. Her resolve faltered. Don't say it like that. Now you have 3 new sisters and a brother besides. Willow's counter was a rapier to her resolve, a flourishing career as a huntress, and you stand to inherit the SDC once I'm too old to run it. Another brick in the wall of her will crumbled. Well, Jack can hardly handle the company given the state he's in. And what would you have had me do? Willow arched a demure brow, never losing control for a moment. Go back to that sniveling weasel. That door is closed. Weiss winced. Jack had not been a kind man. Even if this weakness had been an act on Mother's part, it didn't change his misdeeds. He poisoned everyone around him with words and deeds alike. Maybe they were well rid of him after all. Out of his shadow, she could act as she saw fit without fear of reprisal. Even then, the fear lingered. Well, no. But, Willow preened, you'd best get to know Naruto, then. I suspect your father have a DNA test by the end of the week to quell your doubts. ... And what if I mean, Jack? Oh, him. Mother's smile was all teeth. Don't worry, he's been taken care of. Which brings us to our next topic. Oh dear. She knew that look in her eye, she'd seen it many a time before. I understand you've been taking your anger out on your teammates. Or should I say your sisters? Weiss wilted in her seat, feeling every bit a naughty child. Blake started the fight. Willow's hand flitted out, catching her by the chin. Their eyes met. And you're going to end it. Apologize to her. We just need a bit more dust. Roman smiled as he considered the blueprints. He was not a pleasant smile. Not by any means or measure. Neo quietly prayed her dum-dum would live to see another sunrise. Life just loved its little surprises. Naruto wasn't sure why he expected anything different. They'd been coming fast and strong lately. Ever since Roman ransacked his shop, so too did they descended upon him one after the other, without fail. The way things were going, he half expected Salem herself to show up at his doorstep with a gift basket. Wouldn't that be a hoot? Less monologue, more consoling. Right, crying daughter. Best attend to that. Blake sniffled a little in his arms, curling into him, seeking his warmth. Reflexively, he tugged her closer. Poor thing, she was soaking wet. How long had she been standing out there in the rain, banging on his door, before he'd finally woken up? He didn't even want to consider it, so he didn't. Easier that way. Don't sweat the small stuff. Just calm her down. Because you see, Blake was a clingy daughter. He shouldn't have been surprised by that bit, but there it was. Since he'd cracked through that surly shell, she'd surprised him time and time again. Everywhere he went, she wanted to be. Everything he did, she questioned. Always with the questions. They weren't even bad ones at that. She wanted to know what he could do, and if she could do the same. Now wasn't the time for such questions, however. Semir, let's get you dried off. He tugged her into his apartment after him, searching in vain for a towel. No need to cry. Why did you leave your team? She hiccuped. We had a fight. Weiss nearly bit my head off. Of course she did. He returned from the bathroom with an orange towel and tossed it at her. Let me guess. White Fang. ... No. He tapped a foot. Blake. ... You're actually going to help me. Of course I am. His smile was nothing short of serene. What's family for? Hey, your old man's pretty cool. Naruto's gaze snapped to Sun. Right, forgot he was there. There was a silence, and then, Kurama yawned from the couch. Why is it always blondes? First Cinder, now him. Sun had the good grace to scratch the back of his head. Sorry, wait, you can talk. ... Stay put. Naruto growled and stomped away. I'll wake Kali in summer. I mean it. Don't you dare move. Today just wasn't Roman's day. Not his day, not his week, not his month, not his life. Because you see, everything had gone south. Every thing, all of it, every bit of it. It should have been simple. A quick smash and grab on the docks with Adam's lousy animals. Get in, get the dust, get out, then throw said animals under the bus and make off with the profits himself. And with said profits, he could commence the final phase his MSDR plan, the grand scheme that would finally get that blasted bloody blonde reaper off his arse once and for all. And he would have gotten away with it too, if it weren't for those meddling kids. Bad enough that he'd both wasted time and aura on Monkey Boy over there and the Diamond Cat Girl. But now the cops were on the way and half the Diamond place was on fire. He'd be lucky to break even after this. All that dust. Wasted. He couldn't even pin this on the Fang. Those who hadn't rabbited at the first sign of trouble had been beaten down and left to burn. Just like the embers of his life. A muffled groan at his feet roused his temper to new heights. Right. She was still alive. He had his boot on her chest. Time to put the curious cat out of her misery. Listen you. He moved his new and improved melodic cudgel in the girl's face. I have had it up to here with interruptions tonight. Any last words, kitty cat? Just 3, actually. The girl's golden eyes narrowed and her smile shattered his confidence. Dad. Your turn. Roman absolutely twitched. Duh. A low whistle pervaded the air. The hairs on the back of his neck rose. He'd never heard that sound before in his life. And yet it provoked a strange, nameless dread in him all the same. Like fingers of ice tracing the length of his spine, a frigid whisper in the ear, the promise of a shallow grave. Everything he'd ever feared distilled into one singular moment. And still the whistling persisted. He pivoted in place, frowning now as a heavy fog rolled in from the water's edge. The fires faded. Darkness swept in. High overhead the moon hid her shattered face behind a bank of black clouds. With her passing he felt the temperature plummet. His breath emerged as a thin plume of steam. His teeth began to chatter. An awful screech of steel dragging against stone snarled across the docks. He gulped. The pale haze pressed in on him from every side, obscuring his vision further still. What the hell is this? He cursed himself for the tremor in his voice even as he spoke. Some kind of semblance. The faunus girl hadn't even gotten her name smirked up at him. ... Not quite. He growled and stomped down, only for her to vanish in a plume smoke. Diamond tricks. When he got his hands on her. ... Why had the whistling stopped? A single sharp note echoed behind him. Against his better judgment, Roman turned to face it. Red eyes gleamed back at him from the gloom, framed by tawny blonde hair and dimpled whiskered cheeks. Was that a shovel in his hand? It was, even now dragging against the ground behind, spitting sparks. The Diamond thing looked way too sharp for his liking. Why on earth have a shovel ... if you weren't going to? Oh, that was bad. Sorry to crash the party actually, no. I'm not. Naruto Uzumaki smiled back at him, idly shouldering his strange tool. You've been a busy little bee, hiding from me. Dread became mindless terror. No. Roman stabbed a finger at him. No. You're not real. You can't be here. Hello, Torchwick. The madman spoke over his rant. Been a while. Do you remember what I said the last time we met? He did. He didn't want to, but he did. Not here. He wasn't supposed to be here. Why in the name of the brother gods was he here? Had fun with my little Blake, did you? He waved a hand to the girl, sprawled on her knees behind him. She wanted so badly to beat you on her own. Just her and Sun. I had to let her try. Slim shoulders rolled in a wry shrug. The foolishness of a father, I suppose. Now she's going to watch, and she's going to learn. Roman paled. Oh, sit. You're his kid. This close, he could see the resemblance between them. Nope. All the nope. Time to take the dust and bolt. Neo. He flailed about, looking for any sign of her in the fog. Exit stage left. Nothing happened. Neo, we gotta go. A hand closed around his throat, rendering his words a rasp of a gasp. She's had her fun. Bloody red slits met his, stark and slitted. Now it's your turn. Frantic, he swung melodic cudgel round and bashed at the blonde's arm. Rather than take the blow, Naruto let him go, swaying back. Roman pressed the attack to swing again. He didn't dare squeeze off a shot, not with so much in the way of dust around. He almost wished he could have only to wipe the smile off that big BSDRD's face. Instead his dented cane met empty air as the blonde swayed nimbly aside. You're slow, Naruto chided. Twice, sloppy, 3 times, now, said. A boot cracked out, caught him in the chest, and sent him slamming down to the docks. He felt 3 ribs shatter on the impact. His precious hat went flying off into the fog, even as he reached for it a clawed hand caught him by the wrist and hauled him to his feet. He tried to speak, to say something, anything at all. Clenched knuckles barreled into his face. Teeth flew through the air. He reeled away, only for the hand on his wrist to yank him in for 2 more. 3, 5, 7. He lost track after that. You're not living up to your legend here, Roman. His tormentor let him droop, dangling by the arm. I thought the gentleman thief would fight harder with his life on the line. He could barely see anymore, let alone speak. Amen. There's some spirit. Blasted blonde BSTRD dropped him like a sack of potatoes. Now get up. His legs wouldn't listen. He crawled away. Not like this. Please, not like this. He didn't want to go like this. What's wrong, Roman? He heard the footsteps following him at a laconic pace. Life flashing before your eyes. Yes, very much so. He saw every second of it now, every mistake he'd ever made, reflected in bitter hindsight. But also the happy moments, the good times, the spiders, Neo, Vale. He had been happy with life, content to do whatever he pleased. That was his way. You only had the one go around, so you might as well enjoy it. He'd lived by that creed for the longest time, until he raided that store for the DMN dust. It was just a dust shop. Yes, but that was my shop. A boot crunched down on his hand, drawing a wail from him. I was out of the game. You dragged me back in. Up came his soul, letting him crawl away once again. What? Nothing to say. And here I thought your kind laughed in the face of death. Well, what are you waiting for? That same foot kicked his cane towards him. Pick your cane up. Another kick sent it skittering his way. Fight for your life. Make your last moments count. Roman eyed it for a moment. No, his nerve failed him and he scrambled backward instead. Naruto advanced, shovel in hand. Pick it up, or I'll bury you with it. Roman's resolve broke. He leaped to his feet and ran. He didn't get far. You're ruining this for me, Roman. A hand caught him by his collar and hauled him back, nearly choking him outright. Where's your spirit? Where's your fire? Dad, wait. Blake's voice cut through the fog. We need him alive. He knows things about the White Fang. Information. Don't worry, sweetie. Warm breath ghosted over his ear. I won't kill him ... yet. Roman redoubled his struggle. Killing quickly was a mercy. Any criminal worth his salt knew that. Once you were dead, that was it. Game over. Life wasn't a video game. No extra lives here. No continues. Life was harsh. Life was cold. Life would always take what it was owed, one way or another. But you know what they say. An eye for an eye. The knife slashed up. Roman was just a hair too slow. His vision went dark with a scream. John had never fought anyone like Cinder before. It was nothing like training with Pyrrha. His partner took things slow, giving him time to learn. Adapt, even. Cinder was ... none of these things. All deadly grace and in your face, she was bloody relentless, forcing him to fight for his life or be mowed down. No time to flinch, no chance to falter. You either adapted or she beat you into the ground. He loved it. Less so the pain, but still. Breath burst from his lungs as a scorching first found his torso, folding him in half. He stumbled back with a wheeze, righted himself now, and rushed back in. Crocea Moore struck true, clashing against a black blade forged of hardened glass, forcing a stalemate. Golden eyes leered at him, half-lidded with delight. Come closer. She grinned over their interlocked weapons. I won't bite. John gulped. Not the biting I'm worried about. Cinder hummed a little. Good, you're cautious. That trait will serve you well ... Now, defend yourself. A blood-curdling shriek filled the night suddenly, sending a shiver shooting down his spine. John rounded on it with a yelp. What in blazes was that? Cinder blanched. That would be my father at work. Naruto Dad was still helping her. Why on Remnant was he still helping her? Blake couldn't comprehend it, much less bring herself to understand it. Was it out of kindness, kinship, some mad, misguided longing to see Team RWBY and his 4 daughters reunited, or some darker longing she didn't understand? She didn't know. Blake hated not knowing. Curiosity gnawed at her like a dog with an old bone. Young would have called it a pun. She couldn't be sure. After all, she barely knew the man. On some subconscious level she knew Naruto was her father, her BLD, her parent, but even so she barely knew him. Hell, he'd barely known her until recently, a perfect stranger to her only a few short days ago. And yet, he'd helped her. Torchwick had been ripping her and son apart, right until Dad stepped in. When pressed as to why, he'd shrugged. You're my daughter. He'd chortled softly as though that explained everything. Perhaps it did. I'd do anything for family. She'd seen the fight on the docks, if you could call it that. Slaughter more like. Roman never stood a chance. He'd lost an eye and his dignity besides. When all was said and done, Team RWBY was reunited and no charges were pressed against her. Blake suspected her father's hand there as well. She hadn't been expelled either, or even suspended. Her sole punishment was a weekend detention with Miss Goodwitch. Clearly her old man had some kind of pull with Beacon, that, or had Master Osmond feared him. She wouldn't put it past him. Dad was scary. Speaking of dads, wasn't today Father's Day? A warm hand rubbed the top of her head, gently massaging her ears. It felt nice, so nice in fact, that Blake found herself leaning into it with a pleased sigh. Lost in your head again, are we? Blake blinked, drawn from the dark mire of her thoughts. She looked up from her book to find the man in question standing over her, a blonde brow quirked in mild amusement. I'm sorry, she stood hurriedly, brushing down her apron. I took a little longer on my break than I should have. Were there any customers? Nah, he waved her down, considering the empty aisles. Been a slow day. Might close up a little early. Blake followed his gaze, considering. Sparks and Explosions had seen something of a business boom these last few weeks, what with Torchwick arrested although his partner had still eluded justice and the vital festival fast approaching. Folk finally felt safe enough to shop again. At the end of the day, everyone needed dust, and Father's prices were as reasonable as they were affordable. She herself had enough dust to last the rest of the year, as did Ruby and Yang. Weiss was still holding out. She sensed some issues there, but she'd doubtlessly break down and swing by to restock sooner or later. Definitely later, she decided, recalling an earlier argument between the two. Weiss had held out against hope, but Willow's DNA tests had sealed her fate. The words that followed even more so. I am your father, Weiss. No, that's not true. It's impossible. Search your feelings. You know it to be true. No, ... Yeah, Little Miss Drama Queen was definitely going to blow a gasket sooner or later. Blake just hoped it wouldn't be when she and Ruby weren't volunteering. Wait, did it count as volunteer work if they were being paid? Yang would probably be here too if she hadn't been nailed with another detention via Miss Goodwitch. Hoyai. Kurama yawned, sprawling his small form atop the counter. The cat's brooding again. Blake glared golden daggers right back at the tiny kitsune. I am not. He granted her a toothy grin. And they call me a liar. Yeah, I think that'll do for today. She looked up to find Naruto Dad, turning the sign on the door from open to closed. The waning light of the setting sun shone through the window, caught in his hair, and seemed to set it aflame as he turned to face her. A wry grin tugged at whiskered cheeks, the one feature the two of them shared. She felt her heart skip a little beat. Well, since we've got the time, care for a little early training. We'll have to ask Ruby, but Summer's daughter rocketed down from the second floor, silver eyes bright, broom in one hand, the other darting behind her back. Me. I call dibs. I just finished cleaning. Blake's keen eyes caught her hiding something into her belt. It looked like a box, a gift of some sort. Well, it was Father's Day, and she hadn't gotten him anything. Blake looked away. I don't know. Your ears are twitching. She reached for her bow to hide them, only to remember it wasn't there. She no longer wore it. Damn it. She kept forgetting about that. Ruby darted in for a quick hug and squeezed her tight. Don't hide them, she whispered up at her. You look better without the bow. Heat speared through Blake's face as her sister released her. There it was, her heart kicking again. Was this what it felt like to have a family? It felt ... nice. In short order he led them to the backyard. It was different than Blake remembered, if only because that obstacle course hadn't been there yesterday. Had he really managed to construct it by himself while she was away? Who was she kidding? Of course he could. The man was a veritable army unto himself. Rubes, I want you to run a few laps over the course. The little reaper saluted merrily. Yes, sir. Blake dithered. And me. You were lacking in your fight with Torchwick. His eyes narrowed. It was her only warning. We're going to fix it right now. Dodge. To her credit, Blake did just that. Father's fist filled her vision with blistering speed and her semblance flared as she swapped herself out with a well-timed clone. The second strike was even faster, forcing her launch herself backward. A third blow came for her while she was in midair. Dark heels alighted on a straightforward kick that would have knocked the absolute living daylights out of her. She actually managed to perch upon her father's outstretched leg for a moment before she kicked off it and away. She actually felt proud of herself and smirked a little as her feet touched the ground. Right up until Naruto's open palm careened headlong into her unprotected chin. Gamble's shroud fell from nerveless fingers. Blake reeled, blinded and stunned, in such a state she never saw the armored elbow crash into her gut. But she felt. By the brothers, she felt it. Pain. Her eyes bulged as breath burst from her lungs and brought a fair bit of BLD with it. Her entire body folded around the blow and her confidence with it. She folded down on her knees, wasted and gasping for air. Trying to breathe only made it worse. Sparks sang before her vision, but she recognized the maneuver. It was the exact same combination Torchwick had used against her, only far more brutal. Roman couldn't muster anything like this. 2 hits and her aura was down to a 4th. Oh gods, she couldn't move. The pain. And all of a sudden Dad was there with his healing hands, easing the pain. She felt her breaths even out as the agony receded. His words did not. Don't get CCKY. He chided her gently. Pride's all well and good, but it can be used against you in a fight. Understand? She gasped out of breath and let him tug her upright by the wrist. Yes, sir. She'd never felt pain like that before. She never wanted to ever again. Will I be that strong once you unblock my chakra? By the way his eyes lit up, it was the right thing to ask, possibly. Now defend yourself. Properly this time. Nothing fancy. His knee blurred and rather than risk herself with a reckless dodge, she blocked it with both arms, letting momentum have its day. It certainly did. She hit the ground on one knee and skidded backward, take the chance to gain distance while she could. The amble shroud landed beside her, flung at her feet, and buried itself in the dirt edge first. Her father jerked his chin toward it. Pick it up. Blake did ... and he grinned. That's my girl. She dove at him. Rather than retreat he blocked with a forearm. His fist shot in at her face and by some miracle she managed to catch his wrist. Aura crackled, black against gold. A flash of pride gleamed in Father's bright blue eyes. It wasn't enough. Not for her. She could tell he wasn't taking this seriously now, that he was holding back for fear of hurting her again. That's not a bad weapon, he chided her as she struggled against him, but it's not enough. You might want to see your way to upgrading it. She grit her teeth as he forced her back a step. How so? Well, I was thinking you might need a second blade, or maybe. The backyard door crashed open with a harsh bang, stopping him short. Hello. Yang sauntered in, grinning from ear to ear, clutching a box under each arm. Happy Father's Day. Blake disengaged with a soft CLCK of her tongue. You always have the worst timing. And why is Kurama sitting on your head? Because I didn't feel like walking. Indeed, the tiny kitsune was indeed perched atop her teammate's golden locks, head resting upon his paws. That was a miracle in and of itself. Young didn't let anyone touch her hair. The fact that she'd let an exceedingly dangerous biju like that claim a space for himself up there spoke for itself. She was either in a ridiculously good mood or up to something. Probably the latter, knowing Young. Father's Day, hey. Naruto let her go, considering parcels in her arms. That is today, isn't it? And is that what I think it is? Yup. The buxom blonde beamed as she offered one to him. It took me a while to think of something that wasn't dust-related. Figured you already have enough of that, so I shopped around and got you this instead. Naruto opened the gift with great care, held it out, and let the cloth unfurl. Blake tilted her head. An amber bandana dangled from his grasp, much like the one Young wore, trimmed with gold at the edges. Someone had stamped the insignia of a crimson fox near the edge, a fact that seemed to please Kurama inordinately, judging by his smirk. Well, someone has good taste. This is very thoughtful, Young. Naruto accepted it reverently. Help me put it on. Blake had never seen Young move so fast in all her life. The moment Naruto knelt down, she blitzed him, handily tying it in a knot behind his neck. Something told her she'd been practicing. There, knew you'd like it. Now we match. Blake hid a smile behind one hand. It was such a Young gift that she couldn't quite help herself. And this one's from Blake. Said smile withered and died as Young smirked, and offered up the other parcel, a bulky white box enclosed with a little black bow. Tada, excuse me. She'd gotten him no such thing. Really? Father accepted it with a bemused chuckle. And here I thought she'd given me one herself. Young shrugged expansively. What can I say? You know how shy she is. Blake glared her way. You're dead to me. Awa, love you too, sis. Naruto tore off the wrapping paper and opened the gift with swift, practiced motions. A sudden pang of dread seized Blake. Surely Young hadn't done something stupid. Right. That settled it. She was doomed. Mistral wine. Father withdrew a long green bottle from the wrapped box and considered it with a keen eye. Good vintage. How did you afford this? Young waved a hand. She had some help. Some fancy lady with dark hair and bright eyes. Blake vaguely recalled someone fitting that description. Cinder. A triumphant shout confirmed that Ruby had finally completed her little obstacle course. Not a heartbeat later, she zipped over in a flurry of red petals. Wait, we're giving gifts already. Her hands delved into her ammo pouch and came up with a little red box all her own. Here's mine. Naruto narrowly caught the little red box she shoved his way. All right, Ruby. I'll open it in a second. Where's Weiss? Here, said Era, stalked in, brow gun stormy. Her skirt looked a little singed. And she wasn't alone. Young and I found this brute lurking near the shop. He claims to know you. Young scratched the back of her head. Right, kind of forgot about him in all the excitement. Sorry about that. That's quite all right. The two of you put up quite the fight. Blake took in the bemused newcomer at a glance. Bright red eyes and bushy brows, a sunny smile to match long golden hair etched with flaming highlights. He wore black with a strange white coat over it, shading a long sword at his side. She vaguely recalled the old mentioning someone named Rengoku. With that hair and those eyes. If he wasn't related to Dad, she'd eat her boot. Don't be rude, Weiss. Naruto confirmed it a second later. That's no brute. That's your brother. And he's early. He arched a brow their way. I wasn't expecting him until tomorrow. Did something change after our last scroll call? Pleased to meet you all. The young man beamed back at them, utterly unaware of her racing thoughts. On Kyojiro, almost in the same beat, he pivoted on one heel and bowed deeply toward Naruto. My train arrived a day early, sir. I hope I'm not inconveniencing you. Not at all. Naruto waved him down. Say hello to your sisters. Yes. Father spoke of you at length during our calls. The young man bowed so quickly he Diamennir conjured a breeze. It's an honor to finally meet you. Weiss. Diamennir choked on her spit. BB brother. Young thumbed her chin. I can see it. Blake sighed. Knew it. Ruby's reaction eclipsed them all. Wait. I have a big brother. Young reared back on her heels. What? I know that look. Weiss palmed his face with a sigh. Here we go. Blake covered her ears a second too late. Ruby Rose absolutely squealed. I gotta tell everyone. Kyojiro was settling in well. Naruto took great parental pleasure in just how quickly his son fit in with Team RWBY, not just that, but the lengths he went to win them over. Really, it was like looking at a younger version of himself, all brash enthusiasm and indomitable determination. SBK with a subtle charisma even he didn't seem fully aware of. Ruby had been won over the moment she laid eye on him. Young wasn't far behind, while Blake remained speculative but appeared open to civil discourse. Weiss seemed to be the last holdout, but he suspected she'd cave soon. Once Rengoku decided he was going to be your friend, he was going to be your friend, come hell or high water. Or maybe fire in his case. That really was one hell of a semblance he had. Sometimes he almost thought it was ... well, magic. The boy was full of boundless happiness and curiosity, and endless hunger for excitement in the world at large. For just as Kyojiro reminded him of himself, so too did he resemble his mother. He even had her red eyes, though thankfully not her pale skin and hair. A bittersweet pang coursed through him, one he swiftly suppressed. Better times, happier times, simpler times. It never could have lasted between them, they both knew full well going in, but while it did, it was appealing. In the end, they were too different, from different worlds, almost literally. There could be no fixing her back then, any more than she could hope to corrupt him. Nor could they easily destroy one another. Result: stalemate. Unstoppable force meets an immovable object. They parted on amicable terms better than most, and gone their separate ways. He'd not seen her since. That ... was probably for the best. Besides, this way, they both had a fond memory of those days, and Tenester poked his chest, distracted him from his complicated past. He looked down and found a certain surly Schnee glaring up at him furiously. Fight me. Why should I? Because if I'm fighting you, I'm not dealing with those dolts. She jerked a thumb over her shoulder to where Kyojuro and Ruby could be seen eagerly comparing weapons while a bemused Blake and Yang looked on ... at least until they too were goaded into showing off their own kits. I'd rather be knocked about by you than listen to one more word about gear shifts from my silly sister. The corner of his mouth twitched into a smile. So you admit Ruby's your sister. Weiss made angry Weiss noises. Shut up and fight already. Tempting, boo ... Nope. I've got a better idea. Batting aside her rapier, he placed 2 fingers to his lips and whistled harshly, capturing the attention of Kyojuro and the others. All right kids, gather round. He beckoned them down. All of you against me. How's that sound? Varying degrees of interest fell across their faces. Ruby looked all for it. Blake appears cautiously optimistic, while Weiss was still looking to fill him full of holes. Kyojuro was even now thumbing his sword free from his scabbard. Young alone blanched. Us, fight against you. Nuh-uh, we'll get smoked. A savagely sly smile split his face. Oh ho, had someone learned their lesson from last time? Maybe you're right. He thumbed his chin and pretended to consider her words. That won't be much of a challenge. Tell you what, I'll only use my legs. How's that sound? Silence reigned supreme. Ruby tried to agree, but Yen clamped a hand over her mouth. No, I'm already letting Kyojuro fight alongside you. How's it for a handicap? Yang shook her head firmly, but he could have sworn he saw the beginnings of a smile in her eyes. Nope, not good enough. Sweeten the pot. ... Now he understood. Greedy, gluttonous girl. Like father, like daughter. Honestly, you lot. He couldn't help but laugh at it all. How about this? Whoever manages to land a clean hit on me gets to learn a super secret technique. Weiss scowled. That sounds awfully shady. What could you teach us anyway? Well, he planted a fist on his hip. What would you like to learn? The siblings looked amongst themselves, suddenly intrigued. Gotcha. The hook was set, now to place the bait. Yang looked his way first. Anything we want. Anything within reason. He held up a finger to forestall the deluge of requests that were sure to come. I'm not teaching you any assassination techniques like Chidori. Blake pouted a little, but he held firm. You're not ready for something like that. Ruby's hand shot up first. I want to be stronger. Yang set her body to the right, considering. Give me something that makes me faster. Blake was silent for a moment, then. I'm not particularly fast or strong. Something that works well with my semblance. Weiss bridled a bit under his gaze, but at Ruby's nudging an elbow to the ribs really did wonders. She found HR voice at last. I suppose a bit of versatility would not be remiss. Naruto bit his lips ODMN strong, if only to stifle the laughter that threatened to burst free. Oh, Weiss, she really couldn't be honest with herself, could she? Rengoku merely shrugged. I've already MSTR your techniques, father. A chance to fight you again is more than enough. You've even got a handle on the Racing Shuriken and the majestic Flame Destroyer. Ruby tilted her head. Racing what? Her brother beamed. Yes, all right. He could already think of a few things to teach them. The racing in for Ruby because his baby girl really needed to rely on something other than her scythe. An introduction to the 8 gates alongside training weights would work wonders for Yang. Blake in particular would benefit massively from learning shadow clones once he unblocked her chakra. Weiss ... Yeah, he supposed he could teach her that now, couldn't he? It would make her less fragile on the battlefield. She had asked for versatility after all. Naruto spread his arms wide, then tucked them behind his back and locked in place behind his back with a spike of chakra. On the count of 3... Come at me. You can use any kind of tactics you like, including teamwork and semblances, so long as you don't leave the yard. I won't use my arms, as promised. He hadn't mentioned jutsu or headbutts. Kiddos were about to suffer a nasty surprise. Such was life. Better they learn it here from him rather than lose a limb somewhere else. 3. The kids tensed. ... And 2. Kyojuro's blade gleamed in the light. ... 1. Begin. Naruto kicked forward with both feet as they blitzed him. Cinder stopped by the shop hours later. Upon seeing his face, she paused. What happened to you? Nothing much. Naruto leaned back behind the counter and smiled as he pressed an ice pack to his right eye. Kids got the drop on me. They actually managed to get in a few good hits before I sent them packing back to Beacon. All of them had managed to hit him at least once. Let it be known that Naruto Uzumaki was a man of his word. He'd heal soon enough, but he was just so DMN proud to do it right now. He wanted to keep this shiner for a little bit, you know. As a reminder, a gift, if you would. And speaking of gifts, thank you for getting me a gift in Blake's place. He knew Cinder was the culprit when she stiffened. That was kind of you. She shrugged one shoulder. I'm flush with cash at the moment. It was no bother. And why, exactly, do you have so much lien at the moment? She flushed a deep, BLD red. I have my reasons. Cinder ... Don't make spank you. All that BLD drained right out of her face. You wouldn't. Naruto began to drum the fingers of his right hand against the table. Try me. The door opened with a soft chime, sparing her the indignity, if only for the moment. But not for long. Hello. Summer sauntered in, bearing a deep blue bottle in her right hand. We've come to celebrate. Oh. She paused upon seeing Cinder. You have company. Holly sashayed in behind her, with Willow bringing up the rear, each bearing a bottle of their own. Who's this, now? Whoa. This was either going to be very good or very bad. This is Cinder, he introduced her for the sake of those who hadn't already met her, my adoptive daughter. Say hello, Cinder. Kali scoffed. Younger than I expected. Cinder made a grab for Kali's bottle and tried to brain her with it. Don't drink that. She batted her hand away. This is meant for adults, not little girls. He crept up the back of Cinder's neck as she flushed. I'll have you know I'm quite old enough. No, you aren't. Summer corrected her with a benign, motherly smile. Not enough for this. Not by a long shot. Now see here you. Oh, I see now. Willow has a smile behind her hand. You're Daddy's little girl, aren't you? You don't want anyone to take him from you, how precious. Cinder made angry Cinder noises. Naruto couldn't help but join in on the fun. Well, he shrugged, she always was needy. When she was little she kept crawling into my bed. Father, what? At least I didn't mention the teddy bear. ... Oops. Cinder fled with a curse. I'll get you for this. Summer and the others laughed at her plight. More fools they. Girl had a mean streak. Naruto smiled ruefully. Poor girl. He'd buy her something nice to make up for it. Several somethings. But now that she's gone, Willow revealed another blue glass bottle hidden behind her back. More for us. In short order they dragged down an old table from the loft and 4 chairs besides. He broke out the good glasses and away they went. And why shouldn't they? With the girls gone back to Beacon for the night, they were free to do as they please. It felt ... good to drink with them again. It really had been too long. But eventually, the topic drifted to darker matters, as he knew it would. It's decided, then. Kali laid her drink down with a limpid smile. Summer mirrored the motion, not looking best pleased. We have an accord then. Willow smiled softly as she caressed the rim of her wine glass. The enemy of my enemy is my friend. I'll agree ... on one condition. Raven has no place here. Don't have to tell me twice. Naruto took a long drink from his bottle and passed it around. Screw breaking her legs, I might just kill her straight up if I ever see her again. Summer sighed. Even if came crawling back on her hands and knees. Naruto took another sip of the wine. ... as if she ever would. Her betrayal stung even now, despite all he'd said and done, he still couldn't understand why. They'd been good together, hadn't they? Had he ever known the real her? Was it all one big lie? He wanted to believe it wasn't his fault, that he couldn't have seen it coming, even though he tried. She'd always been a coward. Raven the Craven. Had a nice ring to it, you know. Summer tried again. I know you hate her, but that's still Young's mother. Doesn't she deserve a chance to reconcile? Nope, she whined. But at least Young. Nope. He smacked his lips with an audible pop. Summer's right eye began to twitch. She paused, waited, and then, let me finish my sentence. Nope. She flew over the table at him with a shriek, only for him to catch her by the hips. The moment he did, she latched onto him. Wait, why did he feel so warm? Really warm. More than that he could hear his heart beating. Well, Willow crooned coyly, since it's Father's Day we thought we'd get you a gift of our own. We thought long and strong about it. What didn't you have? She circled round the table on the right, even as Kali moved to the left. Dust didn't seem appropriate, and you don't lack for funds these days, so we 3 put our heads together and came up with something grand. His eyes widened. The wine, and PHRDS, Kali confirmed with a bemused smile, and here at last he noticed her flushed cheeks, the darkly lidded gaze she gave him. We drank some of it too, naturally. It's only fair. You see, it takes some time to work, but once it does, the effects are very potent. Summer dropped her cloak and shrugged out of her dress. Kali did the same with effortless grace. Willow was only a heartbeat behind. Nope. Kurama covered his eyes with both paws and dove out the room. You're on your own. Give me that. Naruto grabbed the bottle and necked it, drained it down to the last drop, then cast it over his shoulder. He didn't even have time to hear it shatter against the wall. Summer reached him first, planted a hand on his chest and pushed him down. She followed as he fell, straddling him with her hips, smashing her mouth against. Naruto let her bowl him over as he came up for air. Taking his eyes off her was a mistake. Willow looped both arms behind his back. Kali took him by the face, steering his lips to hers. He had time enough to smile. The things I do for family. Then there was no more time for words. Their night descended into a carnal haze. Okay, sadly the chapter is over. And if you enjoyed, just leave a like and subscribe with post notification, so when the next chapter is ready, you will be notified. Okay, see you in the next video. Bye.